All right,
We're there.
so this is the podcast that was released recently by the new Tucker Carlson show since he's kicked off Fox for being a bad boy. Um, he finally had Andrew Tate on, who, as we know, has been accused of sex trafficking. All his victims, so far that I know of, say that he's innocent and say that they set up their own TikTok accounts. He's not taking their money, but we're gonna listen to him talk all about it. So.
Yeah, you already said it. It's a pretty controversial interview. I haven't seen it getting that much publicity, or if there is publicity, it's extremely divisive. So I'm just enjoy the opportunity to take a look at this and perhaps shed some light on things that are not, doesn't have a lot of light.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into it.
Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. Imagine being a sixth grade boy in the United States right now. What are you hearing at school? What are they telling you on the internet? Well, they're telling you to stop being yourself, sit still, stop joking, suppress your aggression, share your feelings, obey. Female qualities
Uh,
are virtuous, masculine
I know
qualities are.
I know we're just starting,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that big these are like these are very, what's the word? Potentially triggering, they're very assertive statements, you know what I mean, about what we're telling our children. And it's interesting, like in an attempt um to get people to affirm their identity, we're constantly questioning the very idea of what identity is and how it's formulated. And I don't think there's enough focus on the latter part than there is on the necessity to affirm these ideas, or to not identify in one way and identify in another.
Well,
We can continue.
I think it's weird that now in order to be a true individual, you have to do something this irrational. And I mean, that's just my point of view. So if people don't like that, that's fine. But I mean, that's changing your gender instead of working on yourself and coming up with your unique identity doesn't have to involve surgery or any sort of physical changes to your body. Definitely something that can be a spiritual, cerebral, mental experience, and you can, in most cases, affect more change than just trying to change the exterior. Because really, what needs to change most of the time is inside.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like this entire dialogue and conflict is over the idea of identity itself. This idea that the individual chooses their identity. Well, I mean, historically speaking, if you look cross culturally, you look across the world, people's identities were associated with their actions, the kinds of merits that they accrued. They would get titles associated with it, or deeds that they had done. And at least in my own experience, my own sense of self identity, I would constantly scrutinize as I went about the world doing nothing. It was only until I started voluntarily exposing myself to, let's say, opportunities for growth through conflict, that this idea of identity started to make more sense. Like, your identity isn't ideas that you hold on to and associated with yourself. It's your very essence. It's what you leave behind, the actions you make. Um, just like it always baffled me, the idea of, like, because I say this is what I am, you must identify me as the same way. It's like, what if we did that with respect? Like, say someone in authority just said, I demand respect because I identify as someone who's worthy of it.
Yeah,
you know
I've heard
I mean,
someone try to pull this actually, and it's hilarious.
yeah, no, I mean, it's very similar to people who hold intellectual authority, or they're educators or what have you. They'll pull that card.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And um, it's interesting because, at least in my own experience, like identity, respect is earned. You earn your identity. You earn respect. That's not something that you can just assign to yourself and expect and assume the rest of the people you interact with to identify you as such. If there's an incongruency between how you identify yourself and how the world is identifying you, that doesn't mean the world needs to change. That means that there's a
Hmm.
necessity for alignment.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, if the individual has a problem with that, they can only, like, wisdom is knowing that there's only so much you can control yourself and focusing on that as opposed to shunning the world for all of that which you can't control. And the reason that is because we're all doing the same thing. We're all collectively manifesting this world, this experience, this society that we're a part of. That's why the idea of like individual responsibility associated with having a human experience is very important. And I think the reason there's a lack of it is because there's a lack of dialogue in the spaces where it's necessary for this conversation to happen. Because those very spaces, they don't focus on overcoming yourself and seeking to become constantly being aware and seeking to overcome yourself towards a better version. There's none of those ideas present.
So one thing I don't think a lot of people know, we also give dating advice on the channel. So the easiest way that I would recommend if you're not having enough success in your dating life is to just identify as a man or woman who is more attractive to the opposite sex and demand that attraction that you know you deserve deep down instead of going to the gym and working out or some sort of
becoming someone desirable.
Yeah, no, don't do that. Just
Don't do
demand it and tell everyone, broadcast to everyone that you identify as attractive, and that will fix all your problems. Guarantee it. And don't forget to subscribe to my course. It's only $50 a month. So anyway, let's get back to the
Definitely
video.
not a pyramid scheme. You can trust us. Just go ahead and
Just
give us
click
that
the link
$50
below.
per month, baby.
You'll be fine.
Click the link below.
Give
dude.
us
We'll
all
change your life.
We want your social, your credit card, everything you got, okay? Just fill it in
Do you
the
feel
form.
downtrodden, depressed, financially unstable? Here's the solution to all of your problems. Join our $50 a month course so you can learn how not to be lonely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
That's great.
That's the message. In case it wasn't clear enough, schools around the country have removed urinals from boys' bathrooms. The male body itself is shameful. Sit down when you pee like a good little girl. Views like this are often called feminism or woke politics, but in fact they amount to mass conversion therapy, an attempt to change the fundamental nature of people. Nothing like this has ever been attempted at scale. It's one of the most grotesque and destructive experiments in human history. What would it be like to find yourself the subject of that experiment as a boy trying to become a man during the Biden years? Well, you might kill yourself. Many have. You might decide to reject your own manhood and embrace androgyny, or even switch sexes. Girls are better? Fine, I'll become one.
I mean, to be honest, I've thought about doing this, and we may have to break this up in several pieces because there's so much to unpack here, and there's so much that does create a visceral reaction for me. Like, I mean, literally, if I was to go and change my sex on my driver's license and not change anything physically, I can keep my beard, I can keep my full appearance, and I just tell people I now identify as a woman, respect me, use my pronouns. That's totally allowed and also gives me a position of privilege because I'm now putting myself in as a minority. But the reason I don't do it is because I feel like even though it would give me benefits, it's disingenuous and it's not how I'm going to live my life.
Yeah. What did he just say?
Oh, the gender reaffirming surgery, become a woman. I mean, we can just keep going if you want, and just let me know.
Yeah, let's just keep. I had a thought, but then I was listening to what you said, or maybe just rewind it just like 5 seconds or what have you.
Let's see, where are we at? 113.
As a boy trying to become a man during the Biden years. Well, you might kill yourself.
Oh yeah, pause it.
Many have.
Yeah, so like that. So especially in today's world, there's a serious lack of, let's say positive male role models. And by positive male role model, I don't mean like a role model that displays success in their behavior, like monetary gain, and what have you, but like people of virtue that are rewarded for their virtue. There are very few people that have that don't also have controversy and conflict around their identity and what they espouse. Like Jordan Peterson. There's a bunch of figures.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Truth is
like
now
that.
controversial. You're saying facts and like expressing any opinion that doesn't align with the agenda that they're trying to get, which is emasculation and, toxic masculinity, all those things. There's nothing apparently toxic about femininity or feminism or whatever, but this is continually hammered home, especially if you're a young kid growing up today and you haven't already established your identity. You're being told that being a man is bad, and then if you are kind of a lone wolf in high school or whatever portion of the schooling system you're in, I've heard of people getting love bombed by joining this community, and then they go full force into it, not because they really identify as the opposite gender, but just because it creates a group for them suddenly, and all these people care about them, and now I have all these friends. Oh, I'm definitely these are my people. This is what I was meant to be.
And this is in part because there's a lack of positive male role models at the individual level, like in families, lack of fathers, lack of community leaders if they're even present, and then how isolated our world drives us to be, especially within our own families with the internet. It's like the necessity to find belonging is that much more important, and a lot of philosophy aims to teach you to find that sense of belonging, that sense of purpose inside, as opposed to outside. So not only is there a lack of positive male role models, a lack of mechanisms in our society that allow for meaningful interaction, but you also have those two things perpetually being drought, like it's going forward. So it's like they see toxic masculinity and they think that femininity is the solution, but that doesn't take into consideration the balance that occurs with femininity and masculinity.
Yep.
So the solution isn't femininity. The problem is that there's a lack of useful masculinity. So you need useful masculinity to resolve the problem. And I mean, just as a precursor, for all of his trolling aside, Andrew Tate is certainly representing more so than not, let's say, healthy masculinity. Same with Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, all of these figures that a lot of young men admire and aspire towards.
Right, we look up to them.
It's because of that lack.
Yeah,
it's because of that lack in our individual lives.
Yep.
So it's like both sides are trying to solve the same problem, can't agree on what the problem is. Therefore, all the conversation that follows is just conflict and tribalism.
I mean, even I don't have that masculine guidance in my life that I really would like to, and so I look elsewhere for it, and I find it in these men that are, in my opinion, trying to make the world better for everybody, but are also trying to prevent people from continuing to badmouth the idea of being masculine and embracing what our identity,
And I'd say the reason that is because all of these men, they're telling us to look inward, which is something that our society, and there's no philosophy. This is what Nietzsche was talking about when he said God is dead. There's no more connectedness.
And the blood's on our hands.
To something higher than ourselves. We've lost that and replaced it with monetary gain and subservience.
Yep.
We no longer identify as the masses. We identify as individuals in a mass that is constantly having to be orchestrated. There's no generally speaking, most people view other humans and themselves as not responsible enough to, let's say, carry the burden of decision making, real decision making. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that narrative, the longer it perpetuates, the more things will continue to gravitate towards chaos and conflict.
Yep.
You might decide to reject your own manhood and embrace androgyny, or even switch sexes. Girls are better? Fine, I'll become one. Or more likely, you might simply withdraw into porn and weed and video games and give up on your life before it's begun. You might retire at 19, a less dramatic form of suicide. All around us, this is happening. Noticing it is forbidden, but that does not make it any less real. So it's probably not surprising that Andrew Tate was the most Googled man in the world last year. He offers a different vision. Tate is a former professional kickboxer who about a decade ago began posting advice to young men on social media. Tate's view is that men want respect above all. It's how they're wired. In order to get respect, men must become worthy of it. They must become more impressive. Wake up early, work as hard as you can, stay sober, find God, keep yourself physically fit, don't complain. That's his worldview. Earlier generations of Western leaders might have found parts of Tate's message inspiring. Now it's seen as a threat. The media treated him like a criminal up until the day he was officially classified as one.
We just pause
Just
one
after
second.
Christmas last year, Tate and his brother Tristan were
I would say, just like a side thought, it's fundamentally valuable to have a set of axioms or virtues of which you orient your life around. And if Andrew Tate is if Andrew Tate is anything, he is one such person.
Agreed. And I agree with what Tucker just said, that he would be venerated in a different time, because it was very
100%.
important to have men in our society for as long as there was danger. When there were bears and wolves around the village, nobody wanted Jimmy to go cut his penis off. They wanted Jimmy to go kill that wolf if it was threatening the children or the women trying to do laundry or go get water at the river. So it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
We've divorced
So here's the
ourselves
thing.
from reality.
Here's the thing. It's like, sure, external conflict is no longer as abundant and present as it used to be, but internal conflict is as present and even more, let's say, visible in today's day and age, because there's no war, no external conflict to project that internal conflict onto.
Yep.
That's why we have the world we see today, because what war we're really fighting right now is the war of consciousness, the war of the individual. We have all of these new individuals trying to understand the world come up, and there's two sides. One side that wants to encourage its evolution, one side that wants to keep them stagnant or regress it, and then the people experiencing it who are on no side but their own.
Well, as Americans,
And
we've started to feel really safe because all the wars are now overseas. There's no actual gun violence in the U.S. except for the mass shootings that keep happening. I wonder why that is. I mean, let's blame the guns, right? It's nothing to do with mental health or the fact that people are hopeless, because you keep getting robbed by the government and the corporations, and your spending power keeps going down, and you can't afford a house or to raise a family or do anything like that. Nothing to do with that. Just about the guns. Guns are evil.
yeah, well, I mean, questioning anything, like if you question the system that generates these outcomes as opposed to the variables that are associated with the outcomes, then you would have to change the system that perpetuates it. And if those people like power, they're not going to want that to happen. So
Yep.
any dialogue that doesn't create real change is good dialogue for them, whoever they are.
were arrested and thrown into prison in Romania, where they live. The Tates were held without charges for 3 months, very likely with the encouragement of the British and American governments. In June, they were charged with human trafficking. They're now under house arrest until their trial. Are the Tates guilty of human trafficking? We're not their lawyers, but it's worth noting that as of today, not a single woman has come forward to say that she was kidnapped or imprisoned or moved across international borders against her will by Andrew or Tristan Tate. It's also true that in some ways, the charges against the Tates seem inevitable, like they were always going to happen. Accusing a man of a sex crime is the fastest possible way to discredit what he's saying. Days after WikiLeaks revealed that the US government had been spying on its allies and lying about it, Julian Assange was arrested in London for rape. 9 years later, prosecutors dropped the case against Assange for lack of evidence, though somehow that fact was not as widely covered.
So weird how they didn't
Is that what's happening
report
here?
on the
Again, we don't know.
part where he clears
Jeffrey
his name.
Epstein's dinner partners insist that Andrew Tate is a pervert and a criminal. Maybe they're telling the truth. Either way, we think Tate's views about men very much deserve a hearing. So we flew to Romania to talk to him. We're posting the entire interview here on Twitter because we've been assured it will not be taken down for ideological reasons, as so much of his content has been. The video is long, but if you can, take the time to watch it. Make up your own mind about Andrew Tate. Here it is. So what are you charged with?
That's a really good question. I'm charged with being the head of an organized criminal group, which is in charge of recruiting girls to make TikTok videos to steal the money from the TikTok views.
Recruiting
We
girls
could just pause it
to
real
make
quick.
TikTok videos and stealing.
It's amazing how much like coverage and circulation about like Tate's arrest and
Yeah.
the trials and tribulations associated with it, and while at the same time very little coverage or conversation about like the human trafficking, all of like this.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's a concerted effort to keep some information hidden and others, um, and others, you know, circulated. One could say that it's just the algorithm picking up on what people find interesting, and in a real sense, that could be true. You know, characterized by the willingness of our population, at the very least, to turn a blind eye to corruption or failing systems in order to perpetuate the slave-like life that we've currently been, or our entire population is indoctrinated into it in order to get shit done.
And you can clearly see how non-impartial the media is. There is no non-biased coverage that's just saying these are the facts, because he's going to lay the facts out. The facts are pretty lame as far as evidence goes. They're basically, and he's going to explain this, so I don't want to get into it too much, but they're calling these women victims, even though the women themselves are saying that they're victims, and the state is allowed to prosecute because they've identified these victims, even though the victims themselves say they're not victims. So, on one hand, yeah, I think the algorithm and people are more gravitated toward, oh, this guy is a bad guy who's always saying these things. I've heard him say bad things over and over. Instead of facing the reality, nobody wants to click through and watch little short videos about the fact that children are being sexually abused in this world, on this planet today, in modern society, on planet Earth. This is happening. Nobody's clicking like on those videos. Nobody wants to swipe through 30 of those. But you can feel good about yourself if you can look at this guy and say, well, I might be this and this, but I'm not as toxic as Andrew Tate is for the world. He needs to go away. So I hope he is guilty, so we can convict him and put him in a box and never talk about him again.
Yeah.
The money. So it's really a financial crime?
It looks that way, and it's very interesting because the girls who they've identified to add to the file are saying that we're not victims of anything and this isn't true. But the state believes it's true, and the state thinks that I, as a 35-year-old man, woke up. I was already extremely financially successful. I was already a father. I was already very well known. I had no financial motivation. I have no criminal record. It's not my personality profile, but I woke up at the age of 35 and decided to make girls do TikTok to enrich myself with the pennies that I would earn from TikTok views.
Life is expensive.
Oh,
Tools
come on.
don't have to be.
I don't have-
Whatever you do, do it for
Right.
less at
Perfect.
Harbor
I
Freight.
mean, because I just had a
Feel
thought.
protected under our roof with auto and home coverage at the right
So
price.
I'll stop it as soon as
American
this is
Family
over.
Insurance.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So in the United States,
This necessity
I think-
to like, you know, we're talking about like, you know, black and white and gray. You know how, you know, the necessity to see things from black and white. Like it's like those who, I don't know, those who are constantly searching for evil in something don't understand evil well enough to identify it when it really exists. You know what I mean? So in order to support your worldview up into that point, you have to create simulated evil and simulated good in your mind in order to justify your perception of reality and morality and what have you. So it's like, I don't know.
Well, the Antichrist
Like
is supposed to be like a figure of good and a leader, because no one's going to subscribe to someone who's clearly evil. No one's going to follow them. I mean, except for evil people. The only way the world's going to get behind someone is to be a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, this is true. But it's just like, I don't know. uh, like it's horrible, like how easy it is to manipulate information and spin a certain narrative, and it's horrible how easy it is to distract an entire population with information that is really of no consequence to them locally or globally. And it's also amazing how we almost created this ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, our algorithms are so finely tuned. Unless you're like aware of how the algorithm is giving you content, you'll change your behavior in order to change to
Yeah.
interact with the
And
algorithm. But it's like,
we should explain that because I don't think a lot of people do understand that. So just saying the word algorithm, I think a lot of people are clueless as to what exactly that means and what exactly it's doing.
like when I think of the algorithm, like that same man that you described, the scenario, the hypothetical scenario, like his feed, uh, you know, is like a pseudo echo chamber of ideas. Like there'll be clippets of things that Tate or other people that oppose his sense of self and worldview said, and they'll put that at specific points that generate reaction, or the algorithm notices you spend an excess amount of time looking at it or thinking about it, and if you comment and there's certain keywords, they'll associate it with like some negative variable, like it's so hard, discussing the opposition of perspectives and ideas without talking about the way in which information is distributed.
Yep.
You know, or at least so that was my thought when I
And
thought about that.
if you have an algorithm that only gives you information that you respond to, so things you don't like, you don't respond to. I mean, part of it is you can do a little bit extra, but most of it is which videos are you shown that you watch all the way through, primary. Likes and
Yeah,
comments are secondary. So you can change the stuff you're seeing. If your feed is full of political stuff, if you look up puppy videos and you start liking and watching puppy videos exclusively, the algorithm is not AI, it's not smart. It's only
it's
a
gonna change.
responsive, and eventually you can wipe your feed and mess it all up. So now all you see is puppies, and you have to actively. So people have done experiments to reverse engineer what this thing is actually doing. So of course you're going to exist in an echo chamber unless you actively consume information from both sides. You have to, even if you don't like it, you have to consume and watch stuff from the other side if you want an impartial feed. It's the only way you're
Yeah,
going to get like a fair and balanced view of information in the world.
yeah, 100%.
You want to keep going?
Yeah,
I
we can
think
keep
the
going. Yeah.
belief is that you were charged with human trafficking.
Yeah, that's human
And
trafficking.
this part
because
is
what you do
annoying.
is
He's
you
just
force a girl to
explaining
work
the
against her
BS
will for
charges. You
financial
know what I
gain.
mean?
That's
There's
human
not a lot of
trafficking,
meat
and
here,
their
but it is.
justification for this.
He does
is
a good
that
job
girls do
explaining, and
TikTok.
it's just
some girls I know who they
nonsense.
found who say they're not victims have TikTok accounts.
How do you force someone to do TikTok videos?
I guess the prosecutor is going to have to explain that, isn't he? It's a very interesting scenario I'm in, and I'm inside of Romania, so I have to show a degree of respect to the Romanian judicial system, and I have to show a degree of respect to the situation I'm in. But the overall charge is that there's an organized criminal group. There's a group of us. I'm the head of it. My brother is below me, and we use the lover boy method to convince women to do TikTok videos to make money so that we can steal the TikTok money.
So there's no, just to be clear, you are not accused of pandering, of pimping, of forcing women to have sex with anybody.
No, not forcing them to have sex, not restraining their movement, not stopping them from living a full life, but the fact that we are somehow convincing.
You know, and I like him so much better when he's serious. This situation has created a Tate that can be respected and isn't, like you said, you used to be a troll, similar, and he was doing the same thing, but facing real consequences has turned him into much more of an upright, upstanding man who can actually be. I mean, before I was like, that's hilarious what he's saying. I love it because it's trolling people, but this is the Tate that's just like, okay, I'm in trouble. Now it's time to be serious and be a man and explain myself.
Well, honestly, I think Tate carries himself in this way most of the time. Like I mean, the way he respects the Romanian government, the way he respects Tucker,
Hmm.
the manner in which he's relaying the information with some absurdist. You know what I mean? Like he's handling this situation very well. I think he has a sense of humor, which is why
Yeah.
like we're so easy to take one snippet of one person's actions or the way we perceive their actions and assign their identity and characteristics as that observation. And I think that's a very limited way to, let's say, cast judgment. And the casting judgment is only necessary when you lack understanding, because there's no uh, if you understand something, you understand how it functions, you understand the root causes of it, its axiomatic principles. So if there's a change that needs to happen because you understand it, you can make it happen, as opposed to having to pontificate, I suppose.
Seeing them to have TikTok. Very interesting. I don't think.
But there's no actual. I'm asking you this because I do think it's a widespread belief that you were accused of pimping.
Yeah, no, that's nothing to do with any of this case. Absolutely nothing. And it's kind of scary because the crime in itself of human trafficking is a unique one, because they can ignore the statement of the victim. So the girls have come forward and said, this is insane. You've just picked us because we're near Andrew and we're his friends. But the whole idea of the crime is they can say that she's brainwashed, right? She's under duress. So you can ignore her statement. State says she's a victim regardless of the fact that she says she's not a victim. So it's very interesting because the difference between...
Because this is all, I mean, it's all just the same. They just talk about his charges for quite a while. But
when I first heard human trafficking, my first thought was, because they'll go into how both the legal system defines human trafficking and what they think human trafficking is. And what amazes me is, not at one point in this conversation does it involve the actual trafficking of humans.
I know.
It just describes it as a financial crime. And I think the reason for that, I think the reason why they're labeling this crime as human trafficking, even though it has nothing to do with either word or its definition, is to circumvent the awareness on the other human trafficking shit that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
So because if you confuse the meaning of what it is you're talking about, that makes useful discourse that much more difficult. It was very interesting to me that they called it human trafficking, even though there's no trafficking or anything related to human trafficking going on. They're getting it for a financial crime.
Yeah. And if you
absolutely fascinating.
If you want to change things, change the definition to the thing that you want to not be illegal anymore, so to make it so convoluted and ridiculous that it means nothing, you know.
And the fact that our government, who exactly is charging
Romanian?
Tate? Was it the
Romanian
it's
authorities?
The Romanian government.
Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing that the government is defining their crime as both human trafficking and the way in which they define human trafficking. It's absolutely amazing to me.
And then you have a documentary about child sex slavery and child trafficking, human trafficking, and it gets shouted down and negative reviews and how it's reinforcing conspiracy theories and all this stuff. So you got a ridiculous thing. It's a financial crime. If it's real, because it sounds like these women are saying it's not. Let's say it is, just for a second. It's a purely financial crime. No physical harm was committed to the bodies of these women. They're on TikTok making videos, if what they're charging is correct. Whereas you have this documentary exposing adults sexually exploiting and abusing children, and it's getting shouted down by the same people that are pumping this story to the moon.
Yeah, it's amazing what a what a lack of shared information can do, and the lack of meaningful discourse. I mean, it's like shouting one side or the other as loud as you can will never solve the problem. It's only when there's useful discourse around it. If that's getting televised, if that's getting recorded, if there's useful discourse happening between people who actually make decisions, or between the population who need to realize that they have the actual power and to exercise that power, I'm all for it. I mean, I think it's in alignment with us progressing. You know what I mean? But the moment, I don't know, it's just like, aside from our conversation here, reacting to it, I can't imagine much discourse around these topics and all of these things happening that is generating awareness and understanding in a meaningful sense to bring people together. You know what I mean?
No, definitely not happening, sadly.
Yeah.
Sex and rape is consent, right?
Right.
But they remove all of that. They're like, nope, you're a victim. No matter what you say, we're deciding you're a victim. And they've chosen them. And of course, these girls do nothing pornographic. They've never had sex with anyone, nothing to do with that. So they've picked TikTok. So it's scary. Imagine you're a full-grown man anywhere in the world today. They can find two girls who have TikTok on their phone, which is every single female on the planet, and they can accuse you of forcing them to take the TikTok money. And even if the girls say they didn't do that, this isn't true, then you're still a human trafficker.
But force, what does that consist of? Forcing someone to do something? Are they accusing you of using violence or?
No, they're accusing me, and this is the thing, they're accusing me of using the lover boy method, coercing them by being nice.
And by the way, these charges presumably are public, so.
They're public, and this is extremely serious, but if you actually analyze the overall case against me, they're saying that Andrew and his brother, by being nice men, convinced girls to have TikTok accounts and then take the money. And it's very interesting because inside of the entire case file, there's not a single financial transaction to us for money.
What are the penalties?
They're extremely severe, 5 to 10 years in jail. And I've already served, coming up now, 7 months in a form of jail. They can only
So
hold
you are essentially incarcerated right now.
Absolutely, I'm on house arrest, and that counts as jail. You can only be held 6 months without charge. I was initially picked up, thrown in a cell without charge, and I think the intention of the entire investigation at that point was to find the crime because they had very, very weak evidence. They contacted 2,000 people who know me or knew me. They tried very hard to convince some female somewhere to come forward and say something bad about me. The media machine, which works hands in hands with the justice machine, as you know very well, did exactly that. In fact, they offered bribes effectively. They'd call up ex-girlfriends and say, if you have anything bad to say about Andrew, we can pay you $50,000 for the story. And they tried very hard. They didn't find any evidence of anything. They then released me on house arrest, and then 2 days before the legal limit in which they had to drop everything, they charged me with whatever they had from the beginning, which is very little. And now we have to wait for the Romanian judicial system to analyze the file and, God willing, throw it away.
How long did you spend in jail?
I was in jail for 92 days in a Romanian jail cell.
What was that like?
It was certainly an interesting experience. I won't lie and say it was easy. It was certainly very difficult. The uncertainty of it. It's a very uncertain situation to be picked up on just before New Year's Eve and thrown in a cell without charge. And I'm asking different prison guards and different prisoners, how long am I going to be here? One person was like, I've been here 2 years. I was like, have you been charged? He goes, yeah, but I haven't gone to court yet. Like, everyone's been there for years. I thought I was going to be there for years. And it certainly takes a mental toll on you. And I think jail is a different experience when you know you're innocent. There was a guy in there for murder. He's like, yeah, I murdered someone, I'm in jail. You can your soul and your mind can accept the punishment for a crime. But when you've actually done nothing wrong, I think jail is a lot harder.
Did you know why you were there?
Not initially. So for about the first 2 weeks, I never actually got told in English what I was accused of because I was arrested on December 29th. There's New Year's.
What were the circumstances of that?
Yeah, December 29th, 5 a.m., the armed guards ran in this house. They spent all day searching the entire house. They were very interested in electronics, as most federal agencies are. And then they took me that evening and said, we're going to go and put you in jail for 24 hours. And after 24 hours, you see a judge, and the judge will decide if you stay in jail. And the judge decided I should stay in jail.
What did you do? I mean, who'd you call?
I had a lawyer, and my lawyer came and he said, we need to analyze the case file. We need to see what they have against you. You're being accused of human trafficking. I was like, human trafficking? That's insane. Who? When? What? I went to jail, and then I was given all this paper in Romanian. I don't speak Romanian, although I live here. And then I was waiting for the translation. So I think it's about 2 weeks before I finally got the papers in English to understand why I was in a jail cell. And then I really understood how insane the accusations were.
What is human trafficking?
Yeah, so the overall, my understanding of it, they're saying that human trafficking is when you convince a woman to do something she doesn't want to do for financial gain. And there's different methods you can do that. You can do that through force, and you can also do that through emotional coercion.
I'm sorry, I think he's about to ask the same question, but like, how is that human trafficking? And I love that Tate didn't find out what he was in jail for for about 2 weeks, but the media somehow knew immediately, even in the absence of evidence that
Yep.
continues. I mean, anybody's free to go look up anything they want. So,
Yeah.
if you want, go look it up and put in the comments what exactly there is for evidence against him. As far as I know, basically zero. And so the media immediately, when he got arrested, was like, this guy's going down for sexual exploitation of women and human trafficking, and it fits
Yeah.
right in with the whole narrative they want to spin about him. Toxic masculinity, obviously that's bad. You could never have a masculine male that's not bad.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see like the date stamps on like, the shorts that came out saying, "Oh, check it out, Tate got arrested for this and that."
Hmm.
It's amazing how connected our government and our media is. You know what I mean? Like there was this remember the big call for separation of church and state? What happens when money becomes a new religion in the absence of conventional religion?
Uh-oh, your video just dropped. Okay, you're back.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah. What happens? What happens when uh you know when that becomes your new god and you need another separation of church and state? But the new church is embedded. It's the economy. The
Hmm.
economy is the new church. Going to work every day is praying, and you're praying to a god that you don't really believe in yourself. You're taught to believe in and believe in and deify.
I'd say,
Um,
I would say that we've moved past the idea that you have to even believe in it, because you've got these pools of
you don't
money.
have to.
There's pools of money that are so big, whether they're corporate owned or owned by individuals, that can capture the lobbying and the election process and manipulate it with said money. So the government, you don't even have to worship the money for it to become the new deity. It starts to rule the world because it's the consolidation of powers occurred to the point where democracy can no longer resist the gravitational force of these black hole-sized pools of money that just suck everything in. They
Yeah,
warp
and
space-time.
those black holes of money, they can identify as individuals and get all the rights that an
Yep,
individual can in our day and age.
yep, yep.
Um,
They have the
yeah,
right
no,
to change laws as it would benefit them.
yeah, as soon as God died, in the words of Nietzsche,
Hmm.
the money deity was born and put into its position. So while we need a separation from of economy and state, and the only way that would happen is if
I
there
like
is
that.
there is a like a like a wave of. Okay, the only reason why a population would want to separate the economy and the state is for a virtuous reason, because it would be conducive to the evolution of the individual in the whole.
Yep.
Because in order for that separation to happen, people in positions of authority and power would need to sacrifice um, those things. But that brings me back to one of the previous conversations we had about the necessity, like as a consequence of accruing resources, there now is the necessity to manage and allocate them. And because that exists, because it's existed for so long, um, the people who currently do so recognize, and rightly so, that the population isn't responsible enough to have that burden, that responsibility of allocating resources. And it's like, by virtue of acquiring them, you gain the responsibility. The responsibility is there regardless. Um, and
I would
so like
say that they don't deem us worthy of the responsibility of freedom. I think that that's the underlying under it all, whether they're trying to take money from us or trying to take these different things. They're trying to take our freedom and exert control over us because we're not capable of being adults. We're children. They're the adults. They're
yeah,
daddy. We're the little kids. We don't know what we're doing.
well, in a sense that we're not capable for our own freedom. It's like uh I have this conversation with people who study philosophy often about free will, and I often argue that free will doesn't actually exist. The only thing that exists is will, because uh in order for something to be free, it must be void of limitation. And will is certainly, it certainly has limitation. The freedom we talk about, the free will, comes with recognizing, being aware of that limitation, and pursuing to overcome it. And those who have overcome that limitation know that as soon as you do, a new one exists. After you break the ceiling, there's a new ceiling. And so it's like finding value in that process of becoming aware of your limitation and seeking to overcome it. That's freedom in its essence.
Yep.
Um,
Free will.
and
People want to. This is a nursery rhyme that we tell ourselves. People want to believe in free will. The truth, in my opinion, is free will doesn't exist except for those that work very hard toward it in the pursuit of it. It can exist, but it is not the default mode. The default mode is basically listening to others and just adopting the views that someone else has presented you with. Free will only comes as a consequence of true self-mastery, understanding of yourself, and understanding consequences of thought and action. And a lot of this stuff is on a long time scale. Like the decisions day to day matter very little. The decisions that impact the long-term trajectory of your life are the consequential ones. That is where free will, you should try to find free will to make those decisions.
what I would say is, like perfection and perhaps like God, free will is not a destination you can arrive at. It's only something you can perpetually approach. You can get closer and closer to
Mhm.
free will, and the longer the longer you're making that journey, the closer you get to free will. The more you realize it's not a destination, and the closest thing to that destination is the pursuit of it. You know what I mean? So it's like, eh, this idea that we're not responsible enough to have free will to organize ourselves in a way that encourage conflict, and we don't get too lazy, we don't succumb to sin. If they don't think we're responsible enough for it, yet they are, clearly the world that they've created for us to manifest within isn't doing that job. That job will only occur when we all, like, collective, like, we all become aware of that responsibility of our own freedom, that we don't, that there's nothing inherent that's deserved. The whole point of this is to overcome internal and external conflict, to evolve
Yep.
both individually and as a whole. We want to make a better future, but that better future only happens by overcoming problems or obstacles towards that future.
So
And it,
just as a
but
side note, I do want to, I've forgotten to say that I'm not suicidal. I would never harm myself. And also,
Yeah, me too.
I'm not advocating for free will, or for you to develop that. That's a decision you make at your own risk, and it very well could put you in the same shoes of the man that you're watching on TV who was postulating that, imagine you're 35 years old and you wake up one day and the government is accusing you of a crime that doesn't really require a lot of evidence other than them saying that this girl over here is a victim and that girl over there is a victim, and it doesn't matter what they say because we already said they're victims, and now we're going to prosecute you and throw you in a hole for 5 to 10 years because you've been naughty and you started to exercise some free will and free thought. And that's kind of outside what we, even though you do have money, it's not like real money. It's like child's money. You know, there's old money out there. There's billions out there. So you're just
Trillions.
yeah, trillions. Sorry. And
Yeah.
you're just a tiny little minnow swimming with sharks. So you're going in the hole for trying to, break out of the matrix.
Yeah. Nice try.
Nice try, buddy. We got you.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. It's like, the reason why we won't, even despite all of this surfacing, is because our inability to overcome the duality of tribalism, because both sides can't recognize things that, like, attempts to unify and to solve these problems or to offer assistance to places where it needs it. It's like, I don't know, separating intention from outcome, and then separating yourself from both of them. It's all necessary. You know what I mean? But at the same time, like, I meet people all the time uh, who live a certain life, live their life in a way where they don't really have room to worry about the things that are happening on a
Yeah.
global or even a local scale, for that matter. because it would infringe upon the survivability of them and the people that they love. And that's by design. Perpetually keeping people in a state of survival makes it very difficult for them to come together and rise up for something that's more meaningful
Yep.
than their immediate survival. And of course, like you can't blame the individual who decides to abstain from being aware of all of this stuff and to live life in quiet servitude, because in their mind it's the best option. But I mean, it's like, I don't know, with the way I see our world going, the way that information's controlled, the way that technology is developed and implemented without any real responsibility or discipline. I mean, when I see shit like this, you know what I mean? Like, the Andrew Tate, at the head of like a sting operation, like they're essentially trying to slander his name and to create more conflict where his content's already divisive. And
Well, I would say some of the things that are happening in America are symptoms of boredom and safety. As backwards as that sounds, like you said, you mentioned people that are, at first I thought you were talking about people that are just lazy and self-absorbed, but you're absolutely correct. People in third world countries don't have the time or extra resources. If they're lugging water from a river in order to survive, they're collecting wood to heat their homes in the winter, let's say, they don't have time to be online figuring out what is the problems of other people. But we do. And so if we did collectively come together, it could be really bad. So they introduced these artificial challenges and this artificial strife and conflict and chaos, because in the absence of, in a vacuum, if you remove like God, or if you remove the need to survive on a daily basis, you don't control what flows into those vacuums. Sometimes they're filled with very negative stuff that's worse than what was originally there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I would say that even many people in America who like wake up, go to a 9 to 5, they come home, they have a set amount of responsibilities, or they immediately go to dissociation. Like even in the midst of our addictions and the monotonous lifestyle we live here in America, I mean, there's very little room to invest energy and attention to problems outside of your immediate attention. Even people, because like I grew up very poverty, like a very very little income, single mother household. So I've met a lot of people in similar situations, and like even if you're here in America and you have an internet access and you're on the internet doing anything, that tendency to say that's not my fish to fry, that's not my
Yep.
problem, I have this to worry about. That's even abundant here in a place that is full of technology.
Absolutely.
Coercion.
I think most people, just speaking from the American perspective, most people believe that human trafficking is effectively slavery, selling human beings.
That's what I believe as well. Absolutely. And this is the thing that's so interesting. When you finally end up the enemy of the matrix and they use the legal system as a weapon to punish you for having an opinion, you realize how subjective the law is, right? Because it can be a weapon. When you have something subjective, you can just pick and choose. So if they sit and say, human trafficking is a woman doing something for financial gain against her will via emotional coercion. Well, he knows these two girls, they have TikTok accounts.
Emotional coercion?
Convincing her. That's what I'm accused of, because they have no proof of me doing anything wrong. So they said, he's convinced these girls to do TikTok for money. The girls have said, this is not true, and the state is denying their statement, saying, no, you're brainwashed, it is true. And I went to jail.
So how is the state, so the state is trying to coerce the women, so how is the state not committing human trafficking by the same definition?
Absolutely. It's very interesting. It's very interesting that you can sit someone down and tell them they're a victim when they say they're not a victim.
You're a victim of being coerced, hypocrisy? And we're going to try to coerce you into conceding you're coerced.
Exactly. It's a very interesting scenario. And okay, yeah. And
subjectively,
it's a very interesting scenario. And and it's up until this point.
Can you define a woman?
No judge has looked at the evidence of the case. So up until this point, I've been to court a bunch of times. The only reason I was in court was to discuss my preventative detention. So under Romanian law,
XX
if
chromosome,
you being free can impede the investigation, you should stay in jail. So the judge agreed that, yeah, maybe if he's free, he can damage this investigation because they're trying very hard to get something on this guy. So I've done a bunch of jail time. And now it just begins. The judge is going to look at the case. And like I said, God willing, I still have enough faith in the Romanian judicial system that she's going to look at this and go, this is not a crime.
You're aware of the media coverage of this, however. So you're in jail for 90 days or more, and the rest of the world is talking about you. Do you know what they're saying?
They're saying very heinous things, and I would hate to come across as a conspiracy theorist, Tucker, but I kind of have a feeling that this might be something to do with my influence and an attempt to slander my name. Perhaps I'm crazy. But the fact that they chose such a heinous crime, and they reported it so heavily, and they won't shut up and keep repeating basically a slander attack day after day after day. Also considering the fact that other people who genuinely commit heinous crimes have far more favorable press coverage. But I don't want you to think I'm a conspiracy theorist. Please, Tucker, I would hate for you to come here and call me crazy. Yeah. But something very strange about it, and I think
when Jeffrey Epstein's friends call you immoral?
Yeah. The goal of it is certainly to slander my name, and I like to see it as a litmus test. I like to see it as an intelligence test. Anybody who wakes up and looks at me and goes, he's a human trafficker because of TikTok, they're fully gone.
So, but from the West, just to defend the average news consumer in the West.
Sure.
Andrew Tate, kind of an outlaw.
Yep.
Lives in some palace in Romania, wherever that is.
Yep.
And Romania sounds like the kind of place where human trafficking is like the main industry.
A lot of it happens here. That's what's so crazy about it, right? What's so crazy is if they really wanted to find a human trafficker, I think they could probably do it quite easily. But they managed to get me.
That's certainly the perception. But it's one of those charges that kind of sells itself.
Oh, absolutely. And it doesn't matter if you're found guilty or not, right? You're a human trafficker forever. And but I do think that public consciousness is changing. I think with things like the
interesting part to me is I think either way it goes, it's going to be sensational. If he's acquitted, then the people that want him to go away are going to freak out, and if he's guilty, then the people that are aware of the fact that the evidence is not there to convict are going to, so there's no good outcome that's not going to be controversial here.
Yeah. I mean, unless there was some sort of thing that came out before that where it detailed all of the facts involving the news coverage, the case itself, certain patterns, where certain information is coming from. I mean, this is the problem. It's people need because there's a lack of understanding. There needs to be irrefutable proof because there's no a set of axiomatic principles that people are aware of which they orient themselves throughout the world, like a value structure that isn't outsourced to some ideologically driven organization. It's I don't know. It's just never it's not gonna happen. It's just going to be more conflict. This is going to be, whether he's acquitted or he's called, they say he's guilty. I mean, the story, it's going to get swept under the rug, and he's going to become more sensational. More shit's going to happen after it. Or if he is tried and he gets sentenced to jail, they'll mission accomplished. They got him off the platform, and then this circus continues.
What do you think about martyrdom, though? Because I just actually looked it up because I was curious when he got arrested. I remembered it was somewhere around January, but he was arrested in December of last year. So you've had over 6-7 months now for real evidence to come out, for women to come forth and say, I've been harmed by this guy. So far, you've got zero. So if evidence came out and it was credible, then sure, then his conviction would be far less controversial. But if he's convicted, they martyr him.
Here's the interesting thing is even in the presence, you don't need evidence to convince a population of a narrative. That much is obviously clear. I mean, with everything that we see. You don't really need evidence to convince a population that something happened the way it did. So even if there isn't evidence, showing that he's guilty of a crime, that doesn't stop the narrative that he's a misogynistic, toxic masculine who's only a detriment to society. That just perpetuates because that claim itself is based on zero evidence. It's based off of, just reactions from limited interaction with who he is as an individual. Yeah, I often, regardless of where I am or what I'm doing, I constantly maintain that the only way to really understand somebody is to have face-to-face interaction for extended period of time. Like to really say you know what kind of person somebody is, you need to have that. Otherwise, you're basing it off of secondhand or secondhand perspectives.
Yeah.
And that's not a good way to organize your perception of people and yourself.
Well, personally, I can tell that he's a douchebag and he's guilty just because he's got a bald head and he's got a beard. So, case closed as far
Yeah,
as I'm
it's a very
Yeah,
concerned.
large
also
court case.
because his posture's good. I mean, good posture always means you're up to something malicious.
Yep. No one sits
Yeah.
upright. I don't trust anyone that does.
Yeah, exactly.
Cases recently involving
Especially
some very
when they
famous
say they
people
wouldn't kill
in which
themselves. That's
women
a
were
red
caught
flag.
lying, trying to slander
Big
men's
time.
names for rape and these
Yep.
kinds of things. And I don't think people believe it anymore. But that scares me to a degree because I think that the typical weapon, the standardized playbook is now failing, and I don't know what the new playbook's going to be. It's almost like better the devil you know. You're too famous, you're too successful, we don't like you. Call him a rapist or a human trafficker, put him all over the news, slander his name, try and wreck his life. Now that nobody believes it, what's the next move? What are they going to try next?
Wouldn't it just have been easier
Murder.
to commit like a massive financial crime and defraud people of billions? Come up with like a fake cryptocurrency, call it like, I don't know, FTX, or just give a name to it.
Yep, something,
And
something
then,
random.
steal billions
Yeah.
and get your parents involved and buy a bunch of real estate in the Bahamas, and then like you'd be sort of a hero, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I would have certainly made a lot more money than TikTok because I don't think TikTok even pays you for views. And if it certainly does, I never got a single transaction from it. So it's a very interesting scenario. But if I was accused of a financial crime, my name would not be slandered. So
No, of course. Well, of course not. You have the presumption of innocence. So just back to the jail thing. So you're in with your brother.
At the beginning, I was not, but towards the end, I was, yeah.
What did you do all day?
It's a good question. I looked at the wall, stared at the wall, smoked cigarettes, lots of push-ups, read the Quran.
You smoked cigarettes, did push-ups, and read the Quran.
Basically, yes. And certainly had some introspective moments. Tried my best to get out, tried my best to via my small phone calls, understand what's happening in the outside world. Tried to make sure that the people I love and care about are taken care of because I'm the man of my family and I'm also the man of quite a large, I wouldn't say empire, but life. And there's a whole lot of people who rely on me. You know, you have staff and families, you have children and
I know the
families.
feeling, yeah.
So when you're plucked from that, it's kind of strange. You're in jail and you're concerned for yourself, but your primary concerns are also all your duties as a man. I have duties as a man. I don't want children to starve.
You've got a whole tribe.
I've got people to pay. So it was very, very frustrating, constantly trying to make sure everybody else was okay and feeling helpless. That's what hurt me the most. I was trying to make sure everybody I love and care about was fine, and I wasn't as powerful as I should have been. And that was very
I really
upsetting,
believe that's
especially if
the
they were going to
case.
keep me there for years.
Which part?
I really believe that was the hardest thing for him.
Taking care of the
while
people.
he was in there.
Trying to take
Yeah,
care
that
of
he
people.
couldn't.
Yep.
He could no longer do that because being
A man.
being a masculine man or a man of any stature, as he already is, it comes with responsibility. You don't get one without the other, and he feels a duty to that responsibility as a consequence of what he's overcome to become the person he is today. And I'd say that's extremely true and real what he's saying. And even though his demeanor and his facial structures haven't really changed throughout the entire interview, what he's saying is very authentic. He's not trying to I don't know. He's not trying to make you feel, he's not trying to appeal to let's say rightist values and in order to appease favor. I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, so I did look it up. TikTok didn't start rewarding its creators until July of 2020, so any crimes prior to that obviously can't even exist. So there's only a very small window there of maybe 2 years. I mean, a year and a half actually. 2020, he's arrested in December of 22, 1 year and 6 months. So that's their window to prosecute under the charges that they've got. And I'll also say I'm not a fanboy of this guy, and even though I liked what he was saying and I was loosely following because he was all over the place, I thought it was hilarious. When this came out, I was kind of like, okay, I backed off a little bit and I was like, let's see what comes out. A lot of people are very confident that this guy's very guilty. I don't want to pass judgment just like they're judging him too quickly. I'm not going to judge him as being innocent too quickly either. So it was a good few months, and I kept waiting. Where's the info? Where's the info? Nothing, nothing. And then I started to say, okay, this is all, crap. Where's the, if he's this big of a criminal mastermind, where's the evidence? There's nothing. So,
Yeah, even in the grand scheme of things, it's like even if the only reason like a minor crime would get this much coverage is purely because he has the kind of following he has. You know what I mean? Like anywhere else, this kind of like financial crime probably wouldn't even be in your newspaper. It would just be, a crime that is reported, gets taken care of, guy gets locked up, nobody hears anything. The only people who are aware are like his family and the people associated with the crime. I mean, it's absolutely amazing.
yeah.
The amount of attention generated from this.
So let's think this through. If most other sex offenders, human traffickers don't get this kind of attention, then let's take that off the table as being the real cause of all this kerfuffle. And let's think, who stands to lose if this person is continuing to speak and be listened to by a large portion of the planet? And I think that loosely you could postulate that there's a probability that those people might have a hand in some sort of malicious, nefarious activity that he got himself on the platform where everybody was listening. There's another group that has got him on a platform as a criminal. So I would say that even if you can't identify those people directly, it's pretty clear the enemies that he's made are literally the people that run the world and want to continue to emasculate men and make everybody a little more agreeable. We don't like people that push back and say no. And he says it in here. I'm going to steal his words, but he says real men say no.
Well,
You stand
so
up.
my question for, let's say, anybody that views this is, okay, let's say Andrew Tate's a real threat, and the thing that he's claimed for propagating is toxic masculinity. Okay, let's say that is a threat. Where are all the people trying to combat the toxic masculinity with healthy masculinity? Where's that dialogue? Why do
hmm
we assume that the solution to toxic masculinity is femininity, especially when there's no useful dialogue around the differences between toxic and untoxic femininity?
Yep.
Um, because there's no opposing dialogue to create a virtuous change in the face of a promoter of evil. Um, uh, that means that there's no real good happening, because you have to combat the force that's evil in order to create the change, not exacerbate the root of the problem, which is what he's trying to fix, which is the lack of useful masculinity in both our youth and the coming future generations, given our current political and ideological climate in our world today.
I would say you just exposed the biggest chink in the armor is that this guy is telling you to be a better man, stick to virtue, do the right thing, stand upright. And because there is no official source that's approved that teaches you to be virtuous and good and upstanding and all these things, I think that you nailed it by illustrating the fact that there is no person that they're trying to put up on this pedestal and say Andrew Tate's bad, but this is great for positive role model for men to exist. They don't
Right.
want that to exist. It's not
Yeah.
him. It's the idea of being a man that they want to put in jail. It's the masculinity. It's the testosterone. It's the rebellion that they want to put in jail. And this is a perfect guy because this is the guy that if you emulate him, you're going to wind up in jail too. And so they sew up the whole story in a nice little bun. If you listen to this guy's stuff, we're reinforcing the fact that you're bad. So you're going to wind up just like him. Follow him, you're going to go down that road.
Well, think about the male models that we prop up with our money. like in advertisements. Like what kind of people do corporations get when they want to associate a positive model with their product? They get actors, they get athletes,
What about
people we pay,
what about Dan
people we pay.
Dan
Go ahead.
Bilzerian? Do you know familiar with him?
Yeah, I know him. Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
guy.
yeah, yeah.
That's what they want.
Yeah, so we glorify these people who I mean, whether you're playing a game or you don an actor to portray the significance of an event or in someone's experience, like both in isolation, they're useful to humanity. You know, watching people compete at the highest level in a specific game where the rules are agreed upon and everybody agrees upon the rules, and you just get to watch people compete within that
Hmm.
area. You get to watch people um, yeah, pretend so well to be something it's convincing and elicit an emotional reaction to you. Like that's art. That's they're both art. You know, I mean, they're incredibly useful. But when we prop those up as idealistic male models, what we're really saying is that if you are really good at one thing that generates a lot of money, we will reward you not just monetarily but socially.
Yeah.
Um, and that has nothing to do with virtue. That has nothing to do with virtue. All of our male models, they're there as a consequence of accruing money in a specific industry for better or worse. They may be confident in that field, but the reason they're propped up, the reason they're recognized, is because the amount of money that they've made. Because money, equals recognition and notoriety in today's day and age of viewership.
Yep.
Um, so it's amazing that our society has no models with virtues,
Well, like
or that's part of their identity.
Dan Bilzerian and this guy, if you're uneducated and you don't look into anything about them other than their Instagram feed or whatever, and you just see both guys look similar, are around a ton of women, but I've never heard anything truly profound come out of his mouth. So he's not a danger. That's okay. He can go be a shitbag and just go bang women endlessly. But
Yep.
when he starts, even though he was doing some of that behavior and whatever, when he starts talking about how to be a better man and starts growing as a person and starts saying, hey, maybe this isn't exactly the way, that's when he becomes dangerous. Not back when he was just, because before he became the most Googled man, he was just rich, driving Bugattis, smoking cigars, and banging women. He didn't get in
Yep.
trouble with the system until he started saying, you know what, actually we can do better. And I see that the world needs some guidance, because there is no, exactly what you're saying, there's no virtuous men who are placed in positions of high visibility and who are listened to unless we go seek them out. And if enough people seek them out, then the person gets in trouble eventually. They try to trump up some charges and put him in jail. I mean, that's how I'm viewing what's going down right here.
What I would also say is like Tate. I wouldn't call him like an idealistic, virtuous man, but he is the one that stepped up to the plate in this circumstance with this awareness and the message he's trying to spread.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. Yeah, no, that's about it. That's about it.
I was having
He
serious
stepped up to the
concerns
plate.
about how I can feed the people I love.
Did you ever come to the edge at all?
No, I certainly had some days I was less happy than others, but I made sure that my mindset was built in a way that I could always be doing something constructive. And also, I think you get what you give in life. And if I ever felt particularly sad on a day, I would try very hard to make other people happy, because if I made other people smile, I'd feel better. So even the dinner ladies or the prison guards, I'd try very hard just to make people smile. I know it sounds silly. Some of the prison guards,
it doesn't.
Some of the prison guards were more open than others, but there was a couple prison guards who were ice cold.
I'm already going to stop it, because that's enlightenment right there. And he's also, I've seen on his Twitter, he posted a thing. He's helping people, children in Africa. I'm not exactly sure of the country, but the quote on the post is, you aren't a real man until you've done something for someone that cannot reciprocate. And so exactly what he's talking about, if you're in a bad situation, you might think the dumb instinct is to try to make yourself feel better through, I don't know, smoking a cigarette or some sort of pleasurable thing that you can do for yourself. But what he's saying right there, genius.
Yeah, and I think like if you took that clip out of context, I I mean even with context, I think there are a lot of people who will be quick to say that he's making that up. Um, Even in my own experience, as someone who's found enjoyment out of trolling other people as well, I found myself very similar circumstances doing the same thing, trying to improve someone else's day, even if I'm having a bad day, just by de facto, because as a consequence, when I see myself positively affecting someone else's day, whatever negative thought that I was going on, it gets less traction.
Hmm.
And maybe on the other side of my head, I'm thinking, oh, but there was that positive influence. So, I mean, even logically, that's a very useful strat to make the best out of a bad situation.
Yep.
So if you think if you think that is virtuous, and if you think what he did is virtuous, but you also want to be quick to say that he's just making it up, I don't think you can only say that if you've experienced
Right.
it.
A rising
Um,
tide lifts all boats. So if you bring those around you up, it's also going to bring you up. And I don't know how your bullshit meter is, but mine's finally calibrated as a bullshit artist myself, who's trying to do better and who realizes that that's bringing everybody down. So
yeah,
I spent decades of my life bullshitting and just messing with people, trolling, whatever. So anybody's fallible. I'm not saying that I know for sure, but I'm saying if this guy's bullshitting, he's not only doing it well as an actor, he's also done his research on the back end and is saying stuff that on its face seems enlightened and saying it in a very convincing way that leads me to believe that he's had personal experience and his own life has been improved by this behavior. So if he's bullshitting Inception level, 2 levels deep. He's not.
shit. If he's bullshitting now, he's been bullshitting the entire time that he's had a media presence, because all of his content is aimed around doing that very same thing, trying to build up men who he's never met, because he sees a serious necessity for it in our day and age. So, like, wanting to build up the people around you to improve your own experience, he's been doing that with his own content
Yep.
to start. And he, of course, the negative reactions to that desire has encouraged him to do some trolling and some do some comic. But like, you know I don't know, what was it, there's this video of Joe Rogan talking about, like, there was a moment when I really realized, like, oh shit, like I've got a lot of people tuning in, I've got to, like,
Got a
you know
responsibility.
yeah, you've got a new
Yep.
responsibility. I also appreciate people who find themselves in similar situations to do the opposite and maintain the integrity of who they are, as opposed to um, slightly alter it, the way that they show up in their lives in order to facilitate the or to meet this new role. Um, and I think it's necessary, at least for Andrew, to do this, because this isn't a position he was elected for. This is a position by virtue and necessity.
Hmm.
Um,
Me-
so
It's a merit.
there's no necessity for him to hold that responsibility, even though he does hold it now. That all the influence and power he has, I guess, over the people that follow him, or even the people that dislike him so much that they follow his action in order to have a negative reaction to it.
Hmm. Yep.
Um,
Any publicity is good publicity.
Who didn't
that's
want to
what they
say a word
say.
to me. And I'm like, hey, bro, your hair looks amazing. And you just stare at me like he wants, shut up. But I just try my best to cheer people up, to cheer myself up. And as a man, all you can do is just find the resolve to continue doing the best you can in this current circumstance. So
What were the other prisoners like?
I don't want to insult Romania in any way, and I love this country and I chose to live here. But if I had to describe it for the people, for an American audience to understand, I don't think Romania and a lot of these countries have the same kind of mental health setup or the mental health support that a lot of Western nations have. So you end up in jail. So I think there was a lot of mental health problems inside the jail. So it was very similar. It wasn't just a jail. There was also a lot of mental health problems in there, which adds a new complexity and a new dimension to the suffering, because there's just random screaming and there's suicide and it's certainly not a very nice place to be.
Oh, so it's horrifying.
Yeah, I don't want to go back.
you hear the phrase Romanian prison, and it sounds tough. So it was what you would imagine.
It is, and when this process is over, there's a lot more I will say.
Tucker's
but,
so good at deadpan.
I will say the staff were very nice to me, and I want to make this clear. I want to make it very clear that all the staff in the jail were very professional and very nice to me. I would almost say that they believed I was innocent, and they understood that I didn't belong there. There was a semi-apologetic vibe to the way I was treated by the guards, if that makes sense.
Yes.
They understood very well. I don't think anybody, like I said, with a functioning brain believes that me at the age of 35 decided to steal TikTok money and ruin my entire life without financial motivation to girls who say they're not victims of anything. I don't think anybody with a brain...
Well, the fact that you're not accused of a sex crime or of violence, which I think most people don't really understand.
Yep.
And they can look it up.
Yep.
So while I appreciate the absurdity of being presented with all this information and perhaps knowing what you and I know, and claiming that he's still guilty of all these crimes, I wouldn't say that people who are under that assumption don't have brains. I would say that they haven't been taught how to use them properly and by design. Like everything about our educational institution isn't to facilitate critical thinking. It's to facilitate the regurgitation of information, because that makes you a better worker.
Yes.
School. What was my task? Okay, I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to do that. All right, let's get it done. So it's like, these people. It's not that they don't have a brain. It's that they have been, let's say, not systematically. They've been deliberately, their ability to use has been deliberately dampened.
I would say systematically. I mean, school teaches you to be obedient and do what you're told. You're given tasks by your teacher, boss, and you go do your homework, work, and you don't question things. Because if you say this is stupid, the teacher gives you an F and you get punished. So you don't say what you're told to do is stupid. And my parents, people over 60, still watch TV and still believe the news. It doesn't make them dumb. It just means they haven't spent enough energy going out and verifying that something that used to be true is still true. So they still believe in it. I don't consider them to be dumb for telling me that this is how things are working. I just consider them to be lacking information, or be, consuming information that's propaganda, and they're just not aware of it. So I try not to be insulting to people when I really agree that it's not their fault necessarily. It's just circumstance that puts people there, and smart people do dumb things sometimes.
Well, it's not just that. Smart people don't. It's even more difficult with people intelligence to feel a part of the whole. So, when you're intelligent and you notice people around you as unintelligent, unless you, with like love, compassion, or a sense of unity, take the responsibility to increase their level of intelligence using what you have, you'll separate yourself from them in terms of identity and position, and you'll demonize them because they represent the parts in you that you don't like. Or, instances where you show stupidity, like, fuck, I hate that. I hate when I do that. So you project it on other people. And it's just generation after generation of intelligent people not taking the responsibility of as consequence of being more competent around X thing, have the responsibility to be essentially the shepherd to the sheep. And that's like recognizing the inseparability between the teacher and the student. You know what I mean? I don't know, like if we learn faster, it's our responsibility to, show the path to understanding if somebody isn't capable of traveling the path that you went down, as fast and as tumultuous as it was. If they can't do it, it's like, it's like showing the way to wisdom. So that's in part to it.
Well, I'm not gonna reduce it to being as simple as there's two types of people in the world, but for this example, I'm gonna say that there's two types of people that I would simplify it and say that there's the type that learns fast and creates separation between themselves and others and enjoys the fact that they're superior, and there's others that recognize that they have the extra strength to assist in carrying people who can't walk themselves or helping along those who aren't as fast, and which type you identify yourself and which type you behave as says a lot about your character as a person. So
I would say that's true, but there's like especially for intelligent people, like one of the most desirable options that we can get in our society is to invent or design something that's useful to other people that we can be rewarded financially for.
mhm.
There's very little like doing something inherently useful for yourself and the world around you together isn't part of the equation, because our entire structure is built off of like we're in this competitive but cooperative state of society where you're all competing for positions and resources, but you also have a responsibility to encourage the evolution of those around you, especially when you get to a position of power. It's like this stuff has to be learned. You know what I mean? You have to make the choice to do that with your position, with your intelligence, to choose benevolence in a sea of conflict, evil, chaos, what have you. And it's because virtue isn't rewarded fundamentally.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's money that's rewarded fundamentally. So virtuous deeds are filtered through the acquisition of money.
Yeah.
So or yeah.
I'll be virtuous as long as I get paid, but I ain't doing it for free.
Yeah. And that's by design. We've devalued the morality of actions by only making money the deciding factor. You know, the most important variable.
Yep.
Which is fucking sad, dude.
Well, I like that we're identifying this stuff, and I think the next step in our journey, once we get a foundation of discussing this and getting ideas out there, is to start to brainstorm and come up with ideas to actually make changes. And you know, that is something that I want to do. Watching this, so I saw that there are people in society that are much more of an architectural type of person. I don't understand it yet, but I keep hearing about these people that. So apparently, this guy, forget his name, was approached because there was not enough sausages and bacon were being sold. So he went around to physicians and made breakfast the healthiest meal of the day, and the sales of these products skyrocketed. So there's people that understand how to get not just one person to do what they want, but many, many people to do what they want, and to do it in with soft touch, not force. And so I feel very helpless because I don't fully understand that concept of how to make change occur in the world on a large scale. But if I was put in the position where I understood this and after giving it a lot of thought, had an idea of how I could be useful to the world and make positive changes occur, I don't want to just sit on YouTube and just talk about this stuff in an echo chamber. If at some point there are things that I can do that make material improvements to the world, that is the next step of this journey. This is the start, but this is not the destination.
Yeah, I've had a couple solutions because I've thought a lot about it. To me, the source of all of the problems that occur today are a lack of meaningful interaction and poor and societal systems, or poorly designed societal systems to maximize profit.
Yep.
So the first one, I think we could solve many things by in various communities, equidistant, or like, you know, for a given border of a state, you know, there's a set of hanging gardens accessible to each community that everybody can essentially go towards. And what that would do is it would allow for fresh produce to be made in communities. So like communities itself would be able to, let's say, seize means of production. And if you made it so all the inhabitants of that community must partake or participate in the cultivation and the maintenance of these towers, it would would incentivize meaningful interaction, in the sense where like people are gardening and discussing, the state of the thing, and it's an opportunity for people to meaningfully interact. A lot of the problems with like prejudice and discrimination, like racism, it's a very hot topic today. The only thing in my experience that solves racism, or what racism really is preconceived assumptions about the character and nature of somebody. The only way to resolve that is meaningful experience.
Getting to
It's the
know
only
them.
way. The only way.
If you
Yeah,
get to know
yeah.
someone, you no longer judge them by the color of their skin. Now you know the
It's
quality
the
of their
only.
character.
And the reason why there's so much prejudice today is because there's an surplus information and a scarcity of meaningful interaction.
Yep.
Um,
Well
so
put.
just like with masculinity and femininity, the solution to a lack of meaningful interaction isn't more abilities to connect with people, because there's already a surplus of that. There's so many ways for people to connect, yet we're the most isolated we've ever been.
Yep.
Um,
hmm
the solution is the filling the stock of what's scarce. There's lack of masculinity. We need help. We need useful masculinity. There's a lack of meaningful interaction. We need more
Yep.
meaningful interaction, and
Yep.
that will affect every domain of your society, because we're not so divided. We're not so conflicted, and there'd be greater incentive to randomly help people if you feel more a part of the people that, what I mean. So it's like, I don't know, like that's just one idea that I've had after watching this movie Zeitgeist. Very interesting,
Yeah.
um, at least for that. But yeah, any other solution that I come across like involves like mass unification of some form or another, where the whole theme of dividing people based on ideology and belief no longer works. Like that's the only way.
Well, so like a big project, right? Like systemic change or building a business. You don't the totality of the scope is overwhelming, so you have to identify your roadmap to getting there. So there's a lot of
Yeah,
incremental steps along the journey to improving the world, and some of them are very menial and trivial unless you see the bigger picture. So small changes to the normal person who's not seeing that there is a bigger, larger goal, they'll be like, there's no point in that, it's going nowhere. But they don't understand that this is just one Lego. You're building a whole castle, and it's just one block. You gotta
yeah,
understand that, and you can't get overwhelmed, because nobody builds a castle just at once. It's block by block.
yeah. No,
So
100%, 100%. I It's just, to me, like, there's so many people, especially in our generation, who are thirsty for social injustice to combat against.
and they think violence
So
and burning cities is the way to that, and that's pretty. I mean, I don't know.
well,
That's
one of the problems, it's like there we're up in arms about these horrible incidents, these school shootings, these acts of police discrimination. But instead of trying to find the rabbit hole to find like the root cause to all of this, we just want the most easily accessible cause so that we can address that.
hmm
It's like all I see are people putting band-aids on gun wounds, um, and thinking that the band-aid is not only a step in the right direction, but it's virtuous. Um, and I mean, in the sense, their intention is pure. The intention is good. It's just like all of these social problems, the root causes are very similar and interconnected. And until we can like look at all of the problems facing us as a whole and deliberate on them as one, I think this just perpetual conflict will continue and nothing really will get done.
Well, talking about band-aids, blaming the police aren't in charge of anything. The police are told what to do by people above them. So instead of targeting the police, target the police oversight, target the people that set the rules for the police. If you want change in the policing system, you don't defund the police. you have meaningful mechanical change to the system, and that can only be accomplished from the top down. It's not a bottom up thing. You can't go commit crimes and make the police more sympathetic to your cause. You have to go to their bosses and be like, hey, we are sick of no accountability. We're sick of being treated like criminals, even when we haven't committed a crime. We're sick of people coming back from overseas who've been taught to bust doors down in a war zone and being taken into law enforcement without being detuned from a weapon down to like a constable who's just keeping the peace. Like police.
Well, on the same token, two things I would say about law enforcement. One, they don't need to be knowledgeable of the laws that they enforce. Generally speaking, they don't need to take a bar. They don't need to pass the bar. They don't need to know what laws that they're enforcing. And so I've law enforcement in my family, and I've seen law enforcement, like I've seen videos of law enforcement wielding their authority and position of power appropriately, doing what the law is supposed to do, and then not doing it. The failures of law enforcement come from a lack of conquering of fear and ego. So there's fear, like there's no because of these predispositions or these assumptions about people and character. Like, it's a human problem. It's not really a police problem. It's a human problem. The way they're trained, the way the ideology around it, what they're.
I would say that it's pretty critical that they understand the law, because a lot of the infringements on your rights is their lack of understanding of what their responsibility and what your rights as citizen are. And so
that's all the.
Civil rights violation, it's a fundamental, maybe it's ego, maybe it's anger, maybe it's another problem, but they should at least know better, and they should at least understand that, like, in one state you're allowed to carry a gun, open carry, and the police shouldn't be harassing you when you're complying with the law, because I've read stories about this. People getting detained for legally open carrying by an ignorant officer who is not aware somehow that.
I see so many videos of citizens, not cooperating with police officers because they know they're like, it happens so often. There's no way they're being trained on the laws that they're supposed to enforce, which to me is an immediate red flag. I've thought this most of my life. It's like, how can you be enforcing laws that you're not aware of? I've never heard of police officers having to study the bar, having to study the law.
Well, you said they didn't have to know the law. Did you mean to say they should know the law, or you are still saying?
Yeah, no, I'm saying that they should, if they're going to enforce it.
You said, right? They shouldn't. I heard that you said they don't need to know the law to enforce it.
No, they should.
Okay,
yeah, 100%.
I might have misheard you.
Yeah.
But okay, now we're on the same page. Gotcha.
Yeah. Logically speaking, they should know. They should know the law that they enforce.
Perfect. I was very confused.
So okay, so we have a government with a law enforcement agency that doesn't need to know the laws that they are supposed to enforce. So what does that make law enforcement? It makes them a subsidized militia, in order so that you can tell to do anything, because that's their job. Their job is to follow orders.
Yes.
We already made that clear.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing how the media is fine, highlighting or focusing on specific police departments, shutting down specific police departments in specific areas as a call for reform. It's very interesting that these services that are essentially government, they're public services. I mean, we pay for it with our taxes, right? Not only do they not do their job by definition, that they've never needed to do their job by definition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Well, we could talk about this all night, so I say we just keep going here.
No,
but you're not actually accused of rape,
correct,
selling anyone,
correct,
pimping,
correct.
Okay. That right there raises a lot of questions.
Well, yeah, and this is the thing that's so interesting, because I'm accused of using a method of human trafficking called the lover boy method. So how that would traditionally work is a man would meet a girl become her boyfriend, take her to another country, turn her into a prostitute.
Is it okay if I move?
Say I love you, like pimping.
Of course.
But they're saying, because all my conversations with these girls are very nice, they're saying that I use the lover boy method to convince them to do TikTok. And once again, I never made a penny from TikTok, and I have no interest in girls' TikTok's accounts, and I've never made any money from TikTok in my life.
So that raises the question. So that right there, I think, I mean, we can let people assess. I'm not, an expert on the Romanian legal code, but that's kind of not the impression that most people have. Okay?
And that's the media who have made that the media have tried very hard to do that. And if I had to estimate, I think that the overall intention was just to throw me in a cell, use the media machine to drum up something real. I think that's what the goal was.
So, but what's and I believe that. It seems, obviously.
Yeah.
One thing, I've never been to Romania before, and one thing I'm struck by is the American presence here.
Oh, it's massive.
Fully understand that. So there are 3 NATO bases here
Yep.
now. They're bustling because of the war in Ukraine.
Yep.
One's on the Black Sea,
Yep.
right below Crimea. So this is strategically important, this country, to NATO.
Absolutely.
And so this is a lot less far away than I realized. It's much more American influenced.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think that played a role?
Yeah, well, I think, and I don't want to get this incorrect, I think it's the 2nd or 3rd biggest U.S. embassy in the world. The U.S. embassy here looks like a prison. It's huge. They've got a huge embassy here. And even during Ceausescu, during the communism days, Romania was an ally of the West, even during communism.
Yes.
So, yes.
Ceausescu came to New York.
Yes, that's right, yeah. So Romania and America have been very good friends for a very long time. I have to be careful what I say, but it's certainly very interesting what's happened to me. The American embassy were not particularly helpful, let's put it that way. They weren't very interested in me being locked up without charge. They didn't seem very interested in getting me out.
But you're an American citizen.
Absolutely. And
So you're an American passport holder.
correct.
So I think the average American believes, perhaps falsely, that if you're accused of a crime in a foreign country, particularly a less developed country like Romania, you go to the U.S. Embassy and someone takes an interest in your case just to make sure that your treatment falls within, accepted standards of justice.
Yeah, they came to see me, but when I was asking them what they can actually do about all of this, they weren't particularly helpful. I don't want to peddle conspiracy theories, and I've heard a lot of information, etc. But I wouldn't say they sanctioned it. I don't know if they had to sanction it, but they weren't particularly interested in getting me out. But at least they came to see me more than once. I mean, they kind of pretended to care. The UK embassy didn't even pretend to care. The UK embassy was, I really think they enjoyed it. They didn't.
And you're a British subject as well?
Correct. And this is the kind of thing, and I want to say this here, that's kind of frustrating for me, because Romania is my home now for 7 years, but I'm half British, half American originally. And when something like this happens to you, you have this longing for home. You kind of want to go home. When you end up in a jail in a country where, even though you've lived for a long time, you don't speak the language, you don't understand the legal system, going to court in a foreign language is far more intimidating than in your own language.
I can imagine.
You don't have a clue what's being said. You don't understand how anything works. And then you kind of have this longing for home, but I feel like my home countries hate me, and they hate me because of my message, which I believe to be a positive message. So you kind of have this strange feeling of homelessness, because it's like, well, if I go to the UK, I believe they're going to attack me the same. If I go to America, I believe they're going to attack me the same. So where do you go? It's kind of scary.
Where do you go?
It's a good question. We're going to have to see. And
how did you wind up here?
I moved to Romania. I came to visit a long time ago, before anybody ever visited Romania. I came to visit, and I genuinely fell in love with the place. It truly
what's
is
interesting
a
is they still call the
country.
British
I love nature
subjects,
as
and we're
amazing nature. It's a very safe place. It has this
I don't know how I
reputation of
feel
being
about that.
dangerous. It's not dangerous. It's very safe. The people are very good. The people are very conservative traditionally. It's almost like America
they
was
have
20,
like a
30
king
years
and
ago.
queen, but they don't
It's gorgeous.
hold power.
They have
Parliament
a bunch
does,
of nice
so I'm not too familiar with UK politics, but I imagine like they have like novelty authority, the king and queen, and then Parliament has most of the power.
Yes, Parliament has been given the power voluntarily. I believe. I'm gonna check this before. I don't know. I'll look that up while we're watching the next part. But I don't recall if it's a voluntary secession. Yeah, I don't know if they technically, on paper, could take it back if they really wanted to make that move, or if it's permanent. But yeah, it's.
I'd be interested to how the internet defines the UK's government structure? Like, is it oligarch, or I guess wouldn't it be political structure?
I think it is democracy. Parliament is democratically elected officials, but I just know that the king and queen royal power is still somehow, even if it's only what do they call it when it's like ornate? It's not ornate.
Novel?
Yeah, something like that. The royal powers is the actual power of it has been taken, but they're still royalty. They still hold the positions technically of king and queen of England.
Right.
So there's a
Right.
there's a weird structure there, and obviously they have influence, So
Yeah. Yep.
Restaurants and plenty of things to do, and I've never had a problem here in any way. Never had any issue with the law or with the other side, criminals, nothing, until this came out of nowhere. So it's been very strange.
So, what is it about your message, do you think, that infuriates certain people?
Well, my message is traditional masculinity. My message is to stand up and say what you mean and mean what you say. And even going to the gym nowadays is an act of defiance, because when you have a man who's built with any degree of principle, you say no to things. And I think if I have to analyze my message and why I'm so disliked by the people who dislike me, it's not the things I'm saying, it's the fact that if you adhere to my principles and you adhere to the things I say, you end up being the kind of person who will resist certain ideas. You say no. What kind of man never says no? Name a man who never says no. Men say no, right? Men wake up and say, no, I don't think that should be done this way. No, my children will not be taught that.
It's
no.
the father's primary job.
Absolutely. So when you say to men, listen, you're allowed to have an opinion. You're allowed to have standards. You're allowed to have boundaries and barriers. You're allowed to get up and become important and work hard and try hard and become the kind of man who can't be controlled, then you're seen as an enemy. And
Can we pause it?
Especially with the massive...
Yeah, are you going to forget what you have to say if I just briefly summarize Parliament?
No.
Okay. So Parliament is the highest authority in the United Kingdom. However, the King is still involved. The Crown opens Parliament through the state opening, marking the beginning of the parliamentary year. The Crown also dissolves Parliament before a general election. The Queen does a speech, and then royal assent. When a bill has been approved by the majority in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, it is formally agreed to by the Crown. This is known as royal assent. So I was trying to think of the word ceremonial. So it's ceremonial, but they're still involved. Go ahead.
Actually, can you rewind it just a little bit and play it? So
My bad. I
yeah.
figured that would happen. That's all good though.
No, I apologize.
Oh
no. That's okay.
Let me at least not give them...
Adhere to the things I say, you end up being the kind of person who will resist certain ideas. You say no.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of man never says no? Name a...
Saying no.
Yeah, he said, men say no. What saying no is recognizing, asserting, it's recognizing and creating boundaries. Now, you follow Jordan Peterson. He talks about Jean Piaget and the work on play, how quintessential it is to the developing mind, not just like for the mind itself, but the way in which they orient themselves in their environment, both like physically and socially.
Mm-hmm.
Play is essential, and a big part of play is recognizing limitations and boundaries. It's like you engage in like let's say rough and tumble play, and throughout the course of that, you're like, ow, that hurts, don't do that, and you set boundaries so that the play can continue.
Yep.
That's the role of the man. The man is recognizing those boundaries and trying to facilitate interaction within those limitations, within those boundaries that allow for, let's say, play, or something, something as simple as play. So I like the idea, men say no to things. I think fundamentally that's what that means. It's like the idea of setting and asserting boundaries. The reason why I say that is because by saying men are someone who says no, like that creates a new tribalistic camp. You have men that don't say no and men that say no.
Yeah.
It's important to have the ability to do both. It's important to be able to have the ability to say no when it's useful and it's to have the ability to say yes when it's useful. You know what I mean?
Well, without the other, and this is men and women too, without duality, one becomes the only and is not a choice anymore. So if you only say no, you're just as dumb as if you always say yes. It requires
And
thought, critical thinking, and
a 100%.
I would also say it's not men, it's how we used to find our place in society was with play and a little pushback and see what happens.
But I would also say that, like, me saying this isn't to say that Andrew Tate's like assertion that men say no is an incomplete one. I think him saying that specifically, that men don't say no, is like trying to address the lack of the masculinity, that which says no. You know what I mean? It's because there's a scarcity of this. He's highlighting this aspect of being a man. You know what I mean, or the utility that being a man and adopting that, how that provides balance.
Well, we've outsourced saying no to the authoritative institutions in the world and the country. If you watch a Western, this is not some sort of fake story that's all based in some sort of fantasy world like Game of Thrones or something. This is real, and in the West, if there was a cattle poacher who was going around and messing with everybody's herd or harming other human beings, a murderer on the loose, there was no ability to outsource or offload the responsibility of confronting great evil and saying, no, this is not going to stand. During those times, men had to be men and had to go out and confront these type of things. You didn't just, oh, call the police. There's somebody bad's around. There's no, someone riding in
Yeah,
on a white horse. You're it.
just just like it was the responsibility of the individual to confront evil as it approached.
Hmm.
In our society today, where we can simulate times of peace, that conflict or that evil that hasn't gone away. It's just now inside. It's always been inside. Um, and so that's where our wars are being fought. That's where, like, we shouldn't be outsourcing that responsibility to our authoritative institutions, whether it be educational, economic, or political. Um, so no, I agree 100%. That was the case. When a man or a tribe or a group of people was confronted by a conflict, something that jeopardized the survival of the tribe or the any individual, it was the men in that tribe that were responsible with contending with that chaos, with that evil.
Yeah, and how
Um,
do you think the men got treated by the children and the women if they refused to do so? I mean, now you get
they
treated.
were looked down upon
Right. So now you
because,
get
yeah.
in trouble for being a man. Back then you got in trouble for not being a man. Uh, you know,
But it wasn't just the women and children,
other men too.
like
You're yella.
other men, but also your understanding of gods. Like, you'd be bringing dishonor, the gods would be displeased, and you would know it.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't just everyone and everything around you telling you that was the wrong decision. It's also your very soul that's telling you, and you have to deal with that burden of making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And hopefully that burden encourages you to make the right one in the future. So what we're advocating isn't to disregard modernity and bring back what's traditional. The idea is that we've lost touch with something that's fundamental with what we are as a species and as consciousness, and trying to realign our modern ideas and values with what already is, what kept our species not just surviving but meaningfully integrated for so long. That very important part of meaningful integration, that's gone. You know what I mean? That, like you have to build that, you have to manifest that, you have to find that in today's world, because the sea is it's chaotic. It's full of trying to suppress that connection.
Yeah.
They want you to have that connection with money to devote your life around it,
Yep.
contribute to the economy.
Yep. Absolutely.
Um,
That way you're useful. You're not useful if you're
yeah,
not playing by the rules and contributing to their system where they get to profit at the top.
yeah, they've successfully equated the greater good to their system,
Oh,
to maximizing profit.
yeah.
They've equated the two in value,
If
and that makes it very easy to manipulate the good hearts of the innocent and ignorant.
I would say the easiest way to know that you need to ask some serious questions is if someone is telling you that they're doing something for quote unquote the greater good. Because the war, the removal of your rights, all these things are shrouded in this magical cloak that turns it good. Of like, oh, this is for the greater good. I know it sucks for you, but just shut up. It's for the greater good. Can't you be a good person? You know?
Well, and even taking that a one step further, the greatest representation of what somebody believes isn't what they say; it's what they do. And like this leads to my idea of like how to actually create change in the world. You don't or like the kind of change you want to see. You don't do so by telling somebody they're being not virtuous and these are all the things you need to do to be virtuous. It's by being a model of that virtue itself, so apparent, so undeniable that every time somebody interacts with you, it's an opportunity to live a life more integrated, more full of positivity, like to be alongside that path, because that's the best we can do. That's the best we can control as an individual. When you do that collectively, the power is immense.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I'm a man who never says no. Men say no, right? Men wake up and say, no, I don't think that should be done this way. No, my children will not be taught that.
It's
no.
the father's primary job.
Absolutely. So when you say to men, listen, you're allowed to have an opinion. You're allowed to have standards. You're allowed to have boundaries and barriers. You're allowed to get up and become important and work hard and try hard and become the kind of man who can't be controlled, then you're seen as an enemy. And especially with the massive influence I've gained, I think they look at me and go, he's helping men resist the slave programming. We don't need him around. We need to empty their brains so we can inject the slave programming and convince men to be eunuchs, because once you're eunuched, then you're not a threat.
I think I buy that. Because your message, I'm not the world's expert on your message, but I've seen a lot of it, and it's not explicitly political, actually.
No, it's not political at all. And their original attack before this Matrix attack is they weaponized virtue, which is what they usually do. There's no genuine virtue inside of these people. They weaponize virtue. They find a virtue, and they turn it into a bullet, and they shoot at you. I'm sure you know very well.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah. I was a misogynist for the longest time just for saying that men should have standards. If you tell a man he can have standards in a relationship in any way, you're a misogynist. It's actually very interesting because
What does that mean to have standards in a relationship?
But this is the thing that's so interesting about it, because they've gendered the argument when I never did. I said as a man, you shouldn't have a girlfriend who is a liar and a cheater, and you also shouldn't have male friends who are liars and cheaters. You shouldn't be around dishonest people,
Yep.
Yes.
male or
No
female.
double standard. Yep.
And they gendered it.
Don't want to be
and
around
said,
men or
he's a
women like that.
misogynist. He's saying that men should only act this way with women, etc. I said that men should have standards, and you should have protocols that you're prepared to accept, and you should have hard parameters. And if a woman doesn't want to adhere to those parameters, that's her decision, and it's her prerogative.
No, perhaps it's not made explicitly clear, but the reason why it's necessary for men to have those standards is because those men also have standards of their own, because they themselves don't like dishonesty within them. And 9 times out of 10 probably had to confront an experience of dishonesty within themselves, disliked it, and chose to never, display that again.
Yep.
To actively try to combat it.
Yep.
And I think that's important to highlight, because what he's really advocating for is for you to have standards for yourself, which is something that people in the body positivity movement or even the feminist movement advocate for their respective tribe. I just find that very interesting.
Well, you got 2 ways to resist negativity, and one of them is to continue to immerse yourself in a sea of dog shit and keep your head above water. The other alternative is to swim for shore and get yourself out of the sea of dog shit so that you don't have to swim and keep your head above this toxic water, So to me, you remove temptation to be evil if you stop surrounding yourself with evil, terrible people who are encouraging you to do these things because you watch them do them and you see them get rewarded for behaviors that shouldn't be rewarded, and you say, "Oh man, I'm trying to be good over here and depriving myself of all these things that I could be having." Meanwhile, he's over there getting everything that he wants, but you don't see the inner turmoil that produces for a person being negative, being toxic, stealing, lying, betraying. This is not a way to live as part of a community. So you ostracize yourself. You don't want to be a man like that. You're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time around. You don't want those 5 people to be making you into the worst version of you. You want to find
What I
people
would say,
that bring you up.
what I what I would say is if you're in the pursuit of becoming a more honest person, it is not conducive to that evolution to be surrounded by people who are dishonest.
Hmm.
And so I've spent a lot of time in isolation, grappling with the things about myself that I did not like. And something I found is that the dishonesty that I see in other people, like I said before, that I didn't like was a consequence of that which I didn't like within me. So when I became aware of that evil and I confronted it, I had to be aware. I had to realize that I was dishonest because I was fearful and insecure. Now, because I know that's essentially true for all people, when I come across somebody who's obviously dishonest, I try to show the path, like and give them an opportunity for honesty by showing that not only can I see that it's dishonest, but I don't hold it against you for doing so because I've done the same.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And you can only do that after you've made the pursuit to not be dishonest anymore. You're no longer dishonest, and now you can no longer be affected by the dishonesty of other people, and then now you have the opportunity to alleviate or potentially show the path to honesty for those people because you've walked that path. You
Yep.
went from dishonesty to honesty. And while I agree it's extremely useful what he's saying, not don't surround yourself with dishonest people, especially if you're in the pursuit of becoming more honest. But if you love those people fundamentally, and I know there are many people like that, like me, like where you love people who are, let's say, not, they're not the best, they don't
Yeah.
have the best relationship with themselves or
Hmm.
other people, yet you still love them and you want the best for them. I couldn't create the kind of relationships I wanted with them until I resolved that within myself. And he's giving you advice on how to do that from a position of not like recognizing that you don't want that in your life and trying to get to a point where it's no longer in your life. And I've noticed that, even when I'm exposed by someone being dishonest, I'm not affected by the dishonesty because I can see it. It's not something I don't understand. It's something I understand well because I've experienced it. So there's no fear, you know?
Yep, I absolutely agree. And after my last 5-year relationship ended, I spent several years alone, during which I spent a lot of time trying to understand what it was that would make me happy, what I really wanted out of life. And the conclusion I came to was that the only way to get to those things that I really wanted was to become a better person and to embrace as good as I can possibly be. I mean, no one's perfect, but to be as good as I can make myself. And the other thing that I think is that most people live in the comfort of having a public persona and a private personality. And there's a lot of work that you have to do to become comfortable enough to have your personality be public and private, and there is no duality in your personality. You are the same in your own home as you are out in the streets. You don't have the time to create this separate entity that doesn't really exist. You instead
You know what's
invest your time into
Yeah.
accepting and loving and changing the things that you don't like about that person until it is ready to be viewed by the public and you're comfortable with that. And then maybe if you're in that position, that puts you in a position of strength where you could interact with those people that you love and show them that way because you're so certain and convicted, and you believe so deeply. Belief is one of the most powerful things, whether it's believing in God or believing in yourself. One of the most difficult things to achieve, something you have to work for constantly. And I have respect for anyone who deeply believes in something and has well-founded convictions.
Yeah, no, you said it. You said it very well. It's like, uh, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The online persona and the regular persona. I actually learned that. I learned that for myself through playing video games. When I first got exposed to multiplayer video games, I was maybe fucking 10, 11,
Hmm.
and I used that opportunity. I immediately started trolling, and I would troll and troll and troll and troll, and I would also seek meaningful relationships, but I would just troll because that's all I knew.
Yeah.
And I soon realized that I had no one. I had no real friends. I was
Yeah.
constantly looking for it, and I had to have like I had this like a spiritual experience while smoking pot, and I realized that like essentially to work on myself was the solution. Like if there's any change, any positive, anything positive that I want to manifest in the world, my ability to do X is relative to my ability to do X for myself.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
at that point on, like I treated the interactions that I had online as another extension, like me meeting a person in face to face and wanting to, you know, so like that idea of being true to yourself across any medium that you're a part of, regardless of the level of anonymity, is extremely useful. And you kind of have to learn that. Like you learn uh, the utility in seeking meaningful relationships when you spend so long being alone yet starving for it, you know?
Well, my brother loved Star Wars, was obsessed with the Sith for quite some time, and just kind of because of his lived experience, views the world in such a way where he just was more he was putting evil on some sort of a pedestal because a lot of evil people get what they want. And so what I tried to tell him, because I'm 5 years older than him, so I'm 5 years ahead in the same journey, and I want to help him along as much as I can. I tried to explain to him that if you surround yourself with people like the Sith, then you're surrounded by liars. And even if these liars seem successful, they will stab you in the back as soon as you turn it. And so you can never truly be comfortable. You can never truly relax when you're around evil. And so even if good and virtue is not as appealing and sexy, long term it's much more sustainable, and for you as a person it's much more healthy. For you, it's going to create the best version of you, and the fire of the crucible of evil is not going to forge you into as useful and strong of a person as doing the right thing. For discipline,
Well,
virtue, belief in good, and surrounding yourself with like-minded people.
yeah, no, that it's interesting you bring up Star Wars because I have a brother, technically my cousin, but our mothers are identical twin sisters, so we share the same DNA. I consider him my brother. Anyway, he's also a Star Wars fanatic, so I've had a full childhood being exposed to the themes, the story, and the beauty that is Star Wars, and I've thought it's also given me the opportunity to do a lot of thinking about the meaning of good and evil, especially in like a modern cultural sense. And I've always essentially all the films are about bringing balance to the force, and there's an instability in the force, and that force needs to bring there needs to be balance brought to it, and there's a prophecy, and that Anakin was going to fulfill the prophecy, and I maintain that he did. um, the idea, like the Jedi only exist and are necessary because there is the existence of evil.
Mm-hmm.
Without evil, there is no Star Wars. There's
Yep.
no Jedi.
Yep.
There's no virtue that stands out from anything because you need that light to cast a darkness for it to be light. Otherwise, everything's always perma lit up,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
So like the sexiness of the Sith, it's like the hardest thing that we have to do is like learn that discipline to become aware of our sins and out of virtue choose to not perpetuate the cycles of, let's call it, evil,
Yep.
and choose benevolence. But both are necessary to exist. Both need to exist in order for balance to be a real thing. And the reason we want balance is to bring those two together. We see, people see the value of both evil and good, and And I think alchemists and people, who have held, who have passed down information, hidden information, let's say, or forgotten information, they're aware of that. So it's like despite being burdened with sin, we choose our burden is to choose benevolence, and it's that cycle of being burdened with sin and choosing benevolence that we're here for.
Yeah.
It's not the decisions we make per se. It's the fact that we're here to align those two.
Well, doesn't Palpatine say give in to your deepest desires?
Yeah,
So
in
one of
order
them
to-
says it, and what is culture telling you to do now? Is it telling you to stand up and be principled, or is it telling to give in to whatever shitty desires just pop up? I mean,
Yeah,
and
they're associating identity and the integrity of free will and consciousness with those ideas. In their mind,
Yeah.
that is like a form of discipline. That's like structuring the mind in a way that allows for optimal evolution. That's their thinking. By doing so, it's going to give our future generations a better or more optimal circumstance for their development, internal circumstance. And I think that rests on certain presuppositions about humanity and consciousness that are, I'd say, wholly unfounded.
yeah.
But you don't have to stay with her. Why should you?
What's wrong with that?
Well, that's teaching men to say no. They don't
So-
want men to say no.
So are you arguing that it's better to be with a virtuous woman?
I think so. Yes, I know that's
No,
crazy.
I'm serious. I mean, that seems
I
like
am,
a good,
Tucker. I don't want to.
that seems like good advice.
I don't want to come across as extreme, but yes, I am. And what's actually funny is I really believe most of the things I'm saying were accepted by absolutely everybody 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And now it's public enemy number one. And it's because of the mass influence I have. At one point, I became the most Googled man on earth. At one point. And it's a scary situation I'm
But
in.
if you're arguing that it's really important for a man to find a good woman,
Yep.
a decent woman,
Yep.
an honest woman,
Yep.
that's the truest thing that's ever been said. I
Absolutely.
mean, that's the most important thing any man can do. I mean, I can just tell you firsthand.
Oh, thank you very
being
much.
Married 32 years, that's the most important thing. And you think saying that angered people?
Absolutely, because I'm arguing the only way to do that is via masculine excellence. I'm saying in the world we live in today, it's hyper competitive. And if you want to be the kind of man that has the choice of women to choose a good one, you need to be an excellent man. It's no longer acceptable for you to just be an average Joe or below average. You have to get up and you have to work hard and you have to be smart and interesting and you have to be charismatic and make some money and be in good shape and you have to try very hard. And unfortunately for them, if you follow that path as a man and you become successful in those realms, you end up being the kind of person who resists enslavement. You become the kind of person who wakes up and says, no, I don't believe in that. That doesn't make sense to
I
me.
can't imagine a better message than that.
If you want a good society. So then you have to argue and sit and say, do these people want a happy, functioning society or do they want something else?
What do you think?
I think that I would never kill myself. And I also
Just throwing that out there.
and I also think that
It's not really funny.
When you want to conquer a society, you kill the military age males. That's what you do.
This
It's
is
the first
amazing.
thing they've
What
ever
he
done.
says
They
here
walk in and all the
blew my
men
mind.
have to have their throats cut. They can't perhaps do that, but they can certainly cut your balls off. And then you can't resist. And I think there's certainly a movement to ensure that there's very little resistance left inside of the number one demographic which is required to resist oppression, which are military age males. And they don't want those kind of people waking up with any kind of self-respect or standards or to say, no, I don't accept this. I do not need a ninth injection. They don't want that. They want you to sit and say, I don't need it, but the news said so, so oh well.
So in the one interview that you and I did, you had a line that I've been thinking about ever since. I thought it was so interesting. I'd never thought of it before. You said that a lot of people went along with the vax
Yep.
and that you didn't judge them because facts change. But now that we know that a lot of what we were told was wrong.
First of all, I got two things to say. I've never seen anyone channel Colbert back when he was on his show. I mean, Carlson's like the real version of Colbert back when he was doing the Colbert Report. And then secondly, I just want to mention for the record that I took the vaccine and I got serious cardiac complications for about 6 months that resulted in my inability to exercise. So I took the first shot as a condition of my employment, not voluntarily. I had a good government job at the time. I knew better, but because I didn't want to face the consequences and go find a new job, I caved. I took the first shot, and I felt symptoms that I was expecting to go away. I gave it a whole week, and then I tried to go back to running. I tasted the taste of copper or blood in my mouth, which only happens when I'm completely out of shape and I try to go for a run that overexerts myself. Um, so I kind of kept trying to do test exercise. The second shot was coming up, and just as I thought I was starting to feel better, um, it was time for the second shot. I didn't know any better. In hindsight, I probably could have gone to a doctor and explained the situations, but I thought it was just normal side effects. So I took the second shot, and again, I kept trying to do test exercises. This cardiac problem was persisting. About a month after the second shot, when nothing was clearing up, I went to my PCP. We did a full cardiac workup. I went to a cardiologist. I had a cardiac MRI. Basically nothing they could do. And even though there was no other circumstance or history that I've ever had any cardiac issues, I also didn't catch COVID during that time. I didn't get sick. I just had like lethargic and issues working out. I was tired all the time, fatigued, and I had difficulty working out because something was going on with my heart. I'd ride the exercise bike, and you grab the handles. I know exactly what my heart rate is and my setting and how fast my RPMs, everything. I'm trying to recreate the same thing I've been doing for a couple years now at the gym at work, and I'm struggling. I can never get into the groove. It's like I'm constantly sick, and eventually it did mostly resolve itself, but I just want to say that for the record because nobody wants to hear it, so might as well put it in the middle of something that hopefully people will eventually watch here and there, and it's being brought up. So there it is. I think I'm fully recovered, but how would I know the difference between some minimal, lasting conditions and just normal reality? There's no way to compare the two. I've lost my body prior to the injections forever, and I cannot ever bring that back to compare it to the place that I'm at right now. But there were 6 months where I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to exercise again. And the last time I experienced something like that, I broke my leg when I was 13. It wouldn't heal back together, and I was kind of considering whether or not I had a bone deformity or something where I didn't have a healing process, but it turned out there was tissue in the break site, and we couldn't go in there for a long time. But that's a story for a different thing. Anyway.
Yeah, no, thankfully I've never taken the vaccine, and my mother hasn't, but other people close to me have. I do remember, I mean, there was some like weird effect. I tried not to pay attention to the consequences of those I loved choices because I really didn't have any control over it, just of my own philosophy and perception, chose not to.
Yep.
If I was going to get sick to something, I'd rather develop the proper immunity to it naturally, and if I died as a consequence, then that was my choice.
Well, everybody wanted to say, oh, well, you should take it in case you get sick. But when I got sick from taking the vaccine, I had to face the fact that this was self-perpetrated. I voluntarily stuck my arm out and let them stick this shit inside me. At least I didn't get sick the whole time. 2 years working the whole time through COVID. Didn't get sick once. And then the first time that I experienced these kind of symptoms is from this injection. So there were a lot of long nights that I had to look in the mirror and say, "Wow, you're pretty stupid. You knew better, and instead you're too lazy to face the consequences of standing up and doing what's right." And it's stuff like that that leaves a very lasting impression on your character. And I will never be lazy for the sake of convenience. In the face of something I know to be wrong and harmful, or suspect to be harmful based on what I read, and then my experience confirmed that. Now I know I'm the anomaly because there are a lot of people around me that took it, didn't have these type of problems, but I did read online other people who did have this, and I can personally attest to this is real. The cardiac effects and the those kind of things they're not just propaganda. Personal experience.
Yeah. I mean, whenever an organization is telling you you need to do something, not giving you the option, and they're telling you you need to do something by virtue, that's when I stop and I don't do it. Because like I said before, it's like virtuous behavior. If there's something that's really virtuous, you'll do so by example, and you'll give people the option to choose it. Real virtue isn't imposed upon people. In the light of real virtue, people make the choice to be virtuous. It's not something that's forced upon you or programmed to accept, is what I would say.
Absolutely.
And
No.
some of it was a
But
lie.
yeah. No, I was just gonna say I appreciate you sharing that with me. I pray. I'm going to pray that. I mean, hopefully you've been able to recover some of your. Have
Oh,
you been able to
I'm
exercise?
back to working out. I'm just saying there's
Okay.
no way of knowing if I did lose, 5% of my capacity permanently. There's just no way of knowing that. So I don't dwell on this, but it is an
Yeah.
experience that will forever live with me. And
Yeah.
so it is a question sometimes I think about, and I'm like, I wonder if it would be any different. I wonder if I have lost a little, couple percent of what my
So,
otherwise natural capability would be with exercise. Seems to be
well, hopefully,
pretty normal, back to normal pretty.
yeah. Hopefully, the potentially unperceived consequences are minimal.
And we'll
That's
see
what I
what the long-term effects are for the population. I don't know that either. There's a lot of speculation.
would.
I'm not going to get into it, but we'll just see because there ain't no long-term studies till it's been long-term.
Yeah.
It is a requirement of your own dignity, of your own self-respect, to say so.
Completely. And people should apologize. I really do believe. And I have nothing against the people who fell for the propaganda, fell for the programming, and took
Yes,
the vaccine.
yes, I agree.
Fine. But you should wake up and say, I was fooled. I've learned my lesson. I will not be fooled again. But if you were fooled by the MSM and took the injection and you continue to be fooled and you've not self-reflected and you've not realized that they lied to you the entire way and you now believe the new bunch of lies that are all over the television, then there's something wrong with you.
Or you don't care that you were lied to.
You don't care that you were lied to because I think a lot of this is actually genuinely cowardice. I think it's a very easy worldview. The life is easier if you accept the news tells the truth.
Yes.
Everything they want me to believe is true. Everything's nice and simple. Good guys, bad guys, doop-de-doop-de-doo. And if you want to actually wake up, it takes a degree of bravery because then you have to destroy your entire worldview, everything you've ever understood and everything you're told, and you have to really look at the world and go, oh, this is a mess. And that takes bravery. And once again, that's why they don't want men to be brave. They want you to sit there and go, oh, it's easier if just, CNN said, so it must be true. And it's cowardice. And they're trying to instill cowardice in all of us. That's what they're trying very hard to do. And I think even just me as a person, the people who hate me, my detractors who dislike me so much, even if I say nothing, I just turn up, big, bald, strong, fast car. It's just me. I'm like the enemy to them because I symbolize men who don't comply. And not don't comply in a negative law-breaking way, but don't comply if we don't agree with that or we don't see common sense in that, we're going to politely decline. And that's simply not allowed.
What's it like to have the prospect of prison hanging over you?
I love that he also brings up at some point we should thank Putin for ending COVID because as soon as Ukraine started, it's just brilliant.
I like to believe
it's fantastic
that this is a test from God. I like to believe that if you become the most Googled man in the world for saying that you have mental resilience, that God is going to make sure you don't have that degree of fame without testing you.
I should have asked before. How do you feel about marijuana?
Oh, totally good with it. The two drugs that I believe are completely safe for you are the ones that have the highest lethal doses. So marijuana, I mean, now we've got distillate, but marijuana, if you have it in the flower form, you have to consume like a pallet of it. It's some ungodly amount, like over 1,000 pounds. I'm not going to look up the exact thing, but it's an ungodly amount. And it also isn't filtered through your system normally like a water-soluble drug. It's absorbed into your fat, so your body has a very long time to process that out. So it's not a toxic substance for you, unlike alcohol. And then the psychedelics drugs like mushrooms and LSD, both of those have astronomically high toxic doses. And I'm not aware of any real pharmaceuticals like Adderall or even SSRIs or any of these things anything that has a warning on it that says do not consume with alcohol is already taxing your endocrine system, your liver, kidneys, whichever filters it out, to such a degree that they're recommending you do not pair it with alcohol because your body is already being poisoned by this drug enough that you now should not consume
Yeah.
any more toxins. So I
Yeah.
don't support drug use, but I also don't consider marijuana or psychedelic substances to be drugs. I consider them to be mind expanding substances. Unlike the synthesized drugs that come from a lab that are toxic, that you do get a hangover from, and that includes alcohol. I consider alcohol to be something that it would be better if we reduced the amount of alcohol that was in society. I'm not in favor of banning stuff completely, because what is making something illegal do? It just puts it in the hands of the criminals, whether that's guns or drugs. That's just pure ignorance. But I don't support the use of anything except for those two things, just psychedelics and marijuana.
So, I think so. The reason why you and I value psychedelics and let's say marijuana is because of its utility, specifically as a tool, what it can offer as a tool.
Well, marijuana in high doses, especially consumed orally as an edible, can produce psychedelic effects. Lower level, but that's why these people who consume edibles start freaking out, because it does give you that trip, a lesser version of it. But if you're not prepared for that and you don't understand it, you wind up calling the police and saying, hey, the walls are melting, I'm dying. And you're not dying. You just are unprepared, and you need someone to guide you if you're not prepared for a spiritual journey.
It's exactly right. That's why if you're taking, we could call it medicine tool, if you're taking like pot in isolation, it's important to start with small doses so you can get used to the feeling gradually.
Yep.
That have a guide, like when people take ayahuasca, if they're doing a proper ceremony, the shaman takes the medicine with you and guides you through that experience with you. There's a sense of responsibility and ritual with taking the drug. Maximize the utility of it as a tool. That leads me to say, you remember before when I was talking about social problems and how our society in dialogue and in action puts band-aids on gun wounds? I feel I have the same belief or perception around the entire discipline of psychiatry and the existence of pharmaceuticals. I think it's taking something where poorly and or inaccurately defining, labeling it as a mental disability, and then addressing the symptoms of that disability by changing the certain release of dopamine, serotonin. I mean, based on your description of drugs previously, you have a very good understanding of how it affects your brain and body better than I do. I think it's akin to how we're demasculating our population. We're also making them subservient to pharmaceutical companies and outsourcing the responsibility for human evolution to them, because it's held with the presupposition that these are fixed states and these are things that you can't change and must treat perpetually until you die.
Yes.
Because they're disabilities. They're things that you must overcome because it prevents you from being a quote unquote normal human individual capable of functioning in our worker drone society.
So he's going to talk about this later in the podcast, where he says that he doesn't believe in depression. And what he means by that is you can exist in a depressed state and choose to change nothing except for take Prozac. Or you can say, why am I depressed? I'm not saying depression doesn't exist. I experience it. I cope with it. Okay? It's not even, he says he's not depressed. I experience depression acutely.
Yeah, me too.
And so I know, I can testify to the fact that it's real, but at the same time, it doesn't alleviate, Prozac doesn't alleviate you from improving your situation and saying, why am I so depressed? It's because I'm not a good person and I'm not pursuing things that challenge me adequately. I'm being a lazy bitch, and I'm not doing the right things. And maybe I'll still be, maybe I don't have the right chemicals. But you know what? I can set myself up in the best position to not be depressed if I put a little action and effort into this instead of just saying, hey, doc, give me a pill. no thanks. You can keep that bullshit because I know you don't know what the fuck's going on with it anyway. Most psychiatrists experiment with cocktails of drugs until they get it right, and that's bullshit. They come up with drugs,
Yep.
they just throw it down your hole, and they're like, "Oh, what happened? How do you feel? Oh, well, let's add another one to the mix." It's all
Yeah, yeah.
witchcraft.
Well, it's all just addressing the symptoms without dealing with the
Root
with the
root
root.
cause.
Because
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's like we identify emotions as like negative stimuli or things that are happening to us and must be resolved. And the problem is that um, we can't separate our existence from our emotional experience. That often happens when the emotions are too powerful, or we can't separate the emotions from our identity, and that happens when as a consequence of this specific event that's charged, you latch onto it as either a victim or a perpetrator, and you hold on to that emotion. You bring that emotion from the past with you into the future. Um, so like this whole idea of like addressing the emotional like because we can't control the emotions that we experience. We can only become aware that we're not the emotions and change how we react to it. So just with that understanding, you know that it's not a fixed state. You can change your environment, yourself, or you can change where you're at or yourself in order to change how you're feeling because the two are hand in hand. What you're experiencing, both in emotion and physically, are hand in hand. So if you say I deserve this depression, there's no way out, and you continue to do the same thing over and over again, you're going to get more of the same.
Yeah.
If you change it and you try to even if you pretend to combat it with the opposite outwardly, um, you'll see some change. But I know how difficult it can be to when your negative emotions are so overwhelming that it consumes your entire life. It's like when somebody says that fuck your depression's not real. That can be that can feel like an assault to your identity because it encompasses everything that you are and you're experiencing right now.
Yeah.
And that person can't separate what they're experiencing from that because they're in it.
Yeah.
And
Mo-
of course, they'd have to have extreme wisdom to know that what they're experiencing, the emotional conflict they're experiencing right now, isn't who they are, isn't the end all be all. That this too shall pass,
yeah.
and that there's something to be learned from it. These aren't fixed states that we need to treat. They're temporary states that we need to show how evolves. Because everybody experiences these emotions, but not everybody. There's no pattern in which people recognize that and become able to respond to it as opposed to perpetually be stuck in the reaction to it.
Most people's identity is tied to what they do, um, and who they are right now. Most people are not trying to create a separate identity outside of these stupid things and categories that we put ourselves in. That's generally how people introduce themselves. They start with, "Oh, what do you do?" And it's like,
Yeah.
what you do for a job has nothing to do with who you are. And the sooner that people understand that and start to work on what is my actual identity, what do I believe in, who am I? Because I'm not an engineer, I'm not a librarian, I'm not a taxi driver. I'm a person. And I
Right.
exist in a much more meaningful way than just a productive citizen of a society that lives on a finite planet and believes in infinite growth and infinite productivity. It's all nonsense. And
Yeah.
as soon as
Yeah.
you wake up to the nonsense and start to say, "Oh, that's not what life's about. Life's not about money and working. Life's about being here in your lived experience, trying to make the most of your waking hours, which is still only 2/3 of your life. You spend a third of it dreaming in a state that we don't fully understand, where you're able to create entire environments and act out roles and have other people, other players present. I mean, you want to talk about a simulation or a powerful machine. Your brain is incredible at how fast it can construct an environment, populate said environment, and with, I mean, I don't know, AI might be somewhat feasible now, but like far beyond the capabilities of AI, we are able to create beings, people within this dream state that are in no way discernible from the real thing.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, a lot of what I'm talking about is like has to do with like understanding about what we are, what kind of power we actually have, and what we're meant to do. It's like separating what you are yourself, your identity, separating yourself from all the things that you previously thought who you were. You know what I mean? And that continues ad infinitum until you get to the root of it. It's like, oh, I'm everything and nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm here right now. I can. Just like you, we both have the potential to essentially manifest any kind of presence we want. With let's say transmutative energy. You know what I mean? That's essentially what we do. Transmute them.
Well, I'm capable of murder, and I'm capable of extreme kindness. I'm capable of the full range of human action and emotion. It's my choices that make me who I am, not my capabilities.
And that's why Jordan Peterson argues that men should be violent in the sense that they should recognize the evil that they're capable of committing, but despite being able to commit that evil, choose good, choose benevolence, and that comes from learned experience. You can't do that without understanding the evil within you to some extent, and in order to understand that, you have to act it out. You have to act it out, be aware that you acted it out, and choose not to act out in the future, or have models around you, either modeling the correct behavior or modeling the incorrect behavior. Both is useful, but we don't do it in an organized fashion. It's just chaos. It's chaos based on this system that wants to maximize profit and create worker drones.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
I like to believe that God comes along and says, yes, I've allowed you to become the top G. We're going to see if you really are the top G. I believe that's how the world works. It's certainly intimidating,
Top M.
especially knowing you're completely innocent. But I believe it's a test, and I believe it's my job to pass the test for my ancestors and for people watching over me and for God. And I think I have to do the absolute best I can possibly do in the scenario and the circumstance, regardless of whether I win or lose. I still believe I'm going to win because I've seen the case file and I've seen that no laws have been broken. But even in the very unfortunate circumstance that this matrix attack goes deep enough to throw me into a jail cell, I think I should handle it like a man.
Can we pause real quick?
Mm-hmm.
I think I should stay and...
I really like his perspective that this is like essentially God's judgment. This is a consequence for his actions. It's like, oh, you want to be a top G? Well, we will test you. The Matrix will send the Matrix at you to make sure you are the top G. And I was having... I've been thinking a lot about, judgment and God's judgment and the judgment that we cast as humans and what's the difference. And, God's judgment is immediate. I was like, okay, if God's judgment is immediate and perfect and always happens, what occurs in the natural world that fills those prerequisites? Well, the axioms of physics, the conservation of energy, these, cause and effect. These things happen instantaneous, and they happen according to a set of axioms every time. There's no deviation from it. There's cause and effect, and it's logically derived whether you can perceive all of the causes for a given effect or not. And so, like, in a very real sense, that is God's judgment. That's like for the set of actions that you've taken for in the given environment that you're in. This is the consequence, and you can perceive it as negative. You can perceive it as positive, but this would be God's judgment. So when religious institutions or any authoritative institution in general casts judgment and claims virtue, and it's not in alignment with these natural laws, I don't know. I just see it. It's like it creates more chaos than it does conserve energy, which is what solving problems. That's like fundamentally solving human problems is the pursuit of conserving entropy, of conserving energy, to limit the amount of disorder in the human societal system and to bring it to a state of balance. So that was just my thought when he said that.
Absolutely, I agree. I'm gonna play it, and then I'm just gonna take a quick break. So I'll just let me know when I get back if you want me to stop it. But I got my headset on, so I'll still be listening to the episode.
Finish the process, and I should walk with my head held high and suffer as much as I need to suffer to stick by my convictions and know that I'm an innocent person. And I refuse to break. I refuse to cry. I refuse to be depressed about it. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to smile regardless. And regardless of what happens to me, I want everyone to know that, one, I would never kill myself. And two, I think that as a man, there's always going to be a degree of pain and suffering in your journey. I don't think you're ever going to become a successful man or be good at being a man without pain and suffering. And there's many times in my life where something terrible happened to me, and at the time, if I could change it, I would have. But retrospectively, you kind of look back and go, you know what, that was formulative for me.
That's right.
That is what God decided I needed to become who I became. So all of the pain and all the suffering I've ever gone through in my life ended up, in the end, building me into the person I am, and I'm proud of who I am. So if God decides I need to go back to a Romanian dungeon for however many days, then all I can do is accept it and accept his plan and accept that it's going to make me a better person and
So
deal with
you
it.
see the hand of God in your life?
Absolutely. I think that he is the best of planners. And like I said, if you retrospectively analyze all the times in life you wish you could have changed things,
Yes.
he knew better. And I'm going to have to accept that.
When did you conclude that?
I guess I always kind of knew. I was atheistic for a while when I was younger. But as you get older, you start to look at the world and understand that the thing for me was actually, I guess, a scientific principle. It was Newton's law of equal and opposite force. If there is evil in
hit
the
pause
world,
real
and I'd
quick.
like to think we both agree there's certain.
I think it's beautiful that he went from atheist to theistic, because that's similar to my own journey.
So my issue is that everybody describes a similar experience but wants to argue that you got 10 different ones and this one's the only right one. That's my issue with becoming actually theistic. I do believe in God.
Yeah, no, me personally, I've become what is it? A theosophic apologist. So theosophy, it's like this. It's like this. I guess it's an occult. It's classified as a cult. Anyway, it essentially says it doesn't believe in any one religion, but essentially it's like belief in what unites them all. So
Yep.
like not one religion is right, but the idea that the spiritual religious experience happens with the individual, and that's the root of. It's very interesting.
So
And then
maybe that's what I am. I just don't know the term. I just kind of have arrived at the conclusion that I believe that there was definitely a flood at one point. Definitely some great men existed at one point who tried to make the world better, and for so long we had been living life in a different manner. We tried to write a book down to standardize the way to be good and what evil was so that we could all agree upon this. Whether you believe in the story or not, it's a great way to be on the same page. If we all read the same book, then we all understand we have this common thing we can reference. Oh, I believe in this. Kind of like that story about Cain and Abel, kind of about the story about the Great Flood. You know, we have these shared things that's a common ground to meet on. So that's
this is true.
the usefulness of the Bible. There's a shitload of wisdom in there, and throwing it out in the last 50 years has induced a ton of chaos because we don't have the great unifier that once was.
Well, so I think so like just like I was talking about before with knowledge and wisdom, it's like what the scriptures really are. It's like an account of one. It's like as detailed account as you possibly can of the experience of an individual and what happened as a consequence of their experience. Because all of them have prophets who had some sort of Garden of Eden, and they get cast out into the chaos, and they overcome some things, and they became wise and knowledgeable and enlightened as a consequence. So, the so like for me, it's like the scripture was like an attempt to codify the wisdom and knowledge, and to show that we all have to make the same journey, essentially, in some real sense, to understand what it's talking about.
Well, you see how unchanging the human experience is by the fact that the hero's journey, as told in Homer's The Odyssey, has remained largely unchanged. You can view almost any modern story or any story throughout time against the paradigm of the hero's journey, and you can describe the whole arc of the hero, and it's the same in everything, every single story we tell, every single movie, book, everything. So there
Yeah.
is unchanging wisdom that will always apply to the human experience, whether it's in 0 AD or if it's in 3023 AD. Human beings so far have failed to evolve in a meaningful way, and that means that the wisdom of the past is still very much relevant. So,
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
but
Yeah,
don't tell
I had
anybody I said that, because I also should say I would
anybody
never
said what?
actually murder someone in case I get framed for that. Who knows what.
Oh yeah. Well,
Not
fuck.
suicidal, not homicidal. What else, should I mention that I'm not going to do? I don't know. I mean, maybe no one will ever see this and I won't have to worry about any of those things, right?
This is true. This is true. I would never kill myself. Yeah. Yeah, no. What else? What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so he's talking about Newton's law of opposites, or for every force there's an equal and opposing force or reactive force. That idea is that idea is also what brought me to the idea of God and inherent the inherent unity of all things, um, and this thing called the cosmic doctrine. It's very interesting. I recommend you give it a read.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cosmic Doctrine? Where do I find that?
yeah. It's by a guy named Dion Fortune. You can find a PDF of it online.
Okay.
I guess you could consider it a cult, but
Well,
it's
okay, so let's address that. A cult is something that was invented during a time when Christianity was protecting its stranglehold on the Western world, and so anything that wasn't like part of their ecosystem was given that word, and people were burned and murdered
yeah. Like
as a
to me,
justification of a cult. So that's really a lot of Christian shit's based off of pagan prior stuff
yeah.
that they then condemned, even though it's what their stories are based on. So it's just a crazy, a cult is another nonsense concept that
Yeah,
needs to
it's
just
interesting.
be explained away, and it can be explained away.
Yeah, no, it's a uh, uh what's it what is it? What would you call it? A memoir? It's like it's a descent on the nature of reality, good and evil, sacred geometry, alchemists, alchemy, even human history. It goes into a lot of interesting things,
Well,
and
if you're really familiar with this and you like it, maybe I will kind of get a grasp on it, and we can have a conversation about that.
yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, I mean, it's very abstract, and there's just a lot to talk about. I'm still reading it.
I love new stuff, so I will I'll try to check it out, and we can have a more
Yeah,
in-depth
absolutely.
dive.
Certainly is.
But I mean
There has to
that
be
idea of equal and opposing forces. I mean, it's also prevalent in it. But yeah, no, we can continue. I
an
like
opposite
that.
force, which is good. And I would like to think of that as God. Even the idea of God as a notion, even just as a concept, if that idea of God resists evil, then God is real. If you have two islands,
Oh, your
you have
video
two people,
dropped out.
let's say a ship crashes,
Yeah, sorry.
and you have two people who swim
good,
to two
it's
different
good.
islands. And one island,
go.
they're atheists, savages, and they rip you apart. And the other island, you get there and they believe in God and they believe they're not allowed to kill you. Even just their idea of God saved your life. So I think even just the concept of God in and of itself, if enough people believe and it makes them do good, then God must be true. And that's the equal and opposite force to the evil of the world. And this is how I view it. So I don't see how anybody with a conscience cannot believe in God anymore.
That's such a profoundly different worldview from the one that we're presented with, I think. Yeah. Do you think that's maybe the division in the West between people who see those forces at work and those who don't?
I think the main,
sorry,
I
Chris.
think the West is
Oh,
actually
absolutely.
split between
Yeah,
people
this
who.
is definitely what divides
Um,
first and third world.
Well, so that's the thing. It's um, like, so he can with the applying the logic of equal and opposite forces. He's saying, because there's so much bad in the world, good must exist. Therefore, and I call that God. Um, you know, perhaps a younger me would have said, all I see is evil around me. I don't see any good. So just because bad exists, I should also believe in good, even though there's no example of it. And this necessity for proof. This is the scientific dogma, and the whole reason for that is because the scientific model doesn't take into consideration all of the info. Like it's supposed to be a method for um, uh, measuring reality and usefully codifying information to use what we've learned from those measurements. Um, and part of the only information they're focusing on is knowledge, what we know. But the sum total of available information is it constitutes what we know and what we don't know or believe. Belief is like assigning a probabilistic value to an unverified idea based on previous or currently instantiated axioms. And that's necessary for organizing yourself in the world. You know what I mean? To have those, because, if, there's always going to be there's always going to be confronting the unknown. There's always going to be learning and adventuring into that darkness of unknown, both intellectually or physically.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's useful to be aware of both of them, and I think that's the idea, is like being aware of both of them, and the whole model for understanding, perceiving, and filtering the world doesn't take into consideration the necessity for both of them.
Well, I
You know,
would say that the existence of evil is what brings good out. I mean, we talked about this in Star Wars. You see it in most. I mean, the devil. You can find illustrations of the devil anywhere. You know what he looks like. No one really knows what God looks like. God is usually absent. Like even in the Lord of the Rings, when like you got Sauron, which is the unifying evil,
yep,
and the God figure is never really illustrated. You just see like the prophets and the sub gods like Gandalf or the wizards, but that's not
yeah,
God. That's not
yeah,
the unifying. The closest thing to God would be Gandalf because he's much more of the architect of the resistance he's the architect of good, but I don't know
yeah.
if you could go so far as to say he's the physical embodiment of God.
No, because he also gets tempted by, doesn't he get tempted by the ring and
Yeah,
like,
he can't interact with the ring because he knows that won't be that's too much power. Absolute
yeah.
power corrupts absolutely, and the wisest men out there know that this is the case, and for that reason they do not want power in many cases. So those most fit to lead are often the ones who least want it, and the ones that
Well,
want that
so
power are generally the people you don't want in those positions.
Well, I would say the saying "absolute power corrupts absolutely." I don't think that doesn't properly grasp the nature of having power and the responsibility associated with it. Because, like, when you have power, the necessity to choose benevolence when capable of extreme evil becomes much more important.
Yeah, 100%.
Right,
If
right.
you
So
can't do anything evil, then you being good means nothing.
Right, right. So there's a greater necessity for people with power to exercise an understanding of good and evil, and despite an understanding of both of them, choose benevolence, choose good, choose peace, choose evolution. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, but in an environment or a situation where that isn't present, power corrupts absolutely, is what I would say. You need you need a sufficient understanding of the responsibility associated with the power you have, in order to properly, with awareness and intent, utilize it. And um, I would say there are probably many who have this understanding yet choose to utilize that for their own gain. So the solution isn't to destroy power structures; it's to increase um, our ability to responsibly assume responsibility for. Because I think it's almost necessary for us to organize ourselves in a hierarchical sense, um, in the way that we play. Um, so having useful hierarchies, because like there's a hierarchy even within ourselves that we're constantly mapping and
Well,
comparing
you got Maslow's stuff, and then you've also got potentially the chakras that are spoke about.
Hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or a hierarchy of values. We orient ourselves, our internal environments and our external environments in hierarchies. It's not these hierarchies aren't social constructs. I think they're fundamental to our nature as entities, because it also occurs in our inward experience. There's hierarchies of values and focus and attention, and there's hierarchies. And so and that's like as above, so below. That's a common term used in like let's say modern hermeticism. As above, so below. If it works, let's say this three-dimensional world is below, and um, uh, our united consciousness exists non-locally in a dimension above. If it occurs in one place, it occurs in the other, and it all starts with the individual. That's what all these religions are saying. It all starts with the individual experience. So I mean, this is just, I don't know. That's what came to my mind.
Think and people who don't think at all. I think the people there's no such thing as these two opposing worldviews. I think people believe there's worldview A and worldview B. I disagree with that. I think there's worldview A, the good guys, which are primarily people who do believe in God, do have parameters, do believe in standards, do believe in self-respect, do know how to say no. And there's worldview B, which changes day by day, based on what they're told, which means they have no real worldview at all. They just
really
repeat.
like the way he describes it.
And they have no standards and they have no parameters. There's nothing you can tell them that will make them wake up and go, that's wrong, because they have no inherent morality. So you can say bestiality is accepted and encouraged now. It's good for you for climate change.
Yeah.
And they'll sit there and go, for climate change. Off we go. And they'll just do it. So I think you have a camp of people who think, and you have a camp of people who repeat. And I don't think there's actually the opposing side to the good. I don't think function as a thinking populace at all. I think they simply repeat.
Oh, it's
yeah.
Yeah.
So one group has virtues, principles, the others just adrift, no anchor.
Yeah. Okay. Group A and then Group B. You know what else falls into Group B 100% of the time? Babies.
You said
so
babies?
Yeah, babies.
Okay.
So as we all start off as infants,
yeah,
complete sponges for we construct our sense of self, our sense of our environment by the models around us.
Mm-hmm.
So by default, by our fundamental design, we all start on side B. No baby starts with a connection to God and all of these other you have to discover virtue, and so you have to go from B to A. And while I think it's useful highlighting the difference between someone in someone's mind in Group A and Group B, having a set of axioms of which you stand and fight on versus essentially going with the flow to whatever's the most powerful around you. I think it's important that you go from B to A fundamentally. There's no choice. You have to, by consequence of our biology. So I think I don't know, perhaps useful ways to go from B to A could help our population.
Well, let me throw a monkey wrench in that theory because
Yep.
I recently have begun to become more and more inclined to believe that reincarnation may be a thing. Not only from my
Yeah.
own psychedelic experiences and catching glimpses or flashes of memory, but also reading about the fact that because the Indian culture believes this to be part of the fabric of their existence, they they have done research on this where they've studied children younger than 7. This phenomenon dissipates between the ages of 5 and 7 in most children, but they interview children and find that they know things that they should not be able to know. Things
Yeah.
like remembering being on a village in the middle of these two rivers in China, and they name the rivers, and sure enough, these two rivers meet, and there's a village there. So I kind of let that stew for a couple weeks after I heard that, and then one night I decided to go on Reddit and look this up to see if this phenomenon was manifesting it in American or whoever's on Reddit, the world,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of similar stuff on there. A lot of people, either parents or children who had been recounted this from their parents and were now saying that they didn't recall any of this. However, their parents insisted that all this happened, and they were really freaked out by it in a lot of cases, whether that's knowledge you shouldn't have, skills you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's true, what you said. It could
So
be.
what I would say is I also believe in reincarnation. I've seen those same studies. I would say that what Andrew's talking about in Group A, like that those people are there as a consequence of, like, let's say, lived experience. The information that these babies are getting about their past lives, that's not a consequence of lived experience. That information's coming non-locally. That's coming from
Oh,
that's
okay.
they're
In
not
this
getting that
life,
information.
non-lived experience in this life.
Right. So what
Yeah.
that means is, despite getting that information, they're still going through the flow of their environment. That has nothing to do with being in Group B, getting that download of information, because Group B is just about having to model your behavior, and how to you essentially have to go with the flow, like fundamental, like babies are we can recognize emotion in faces off of birth. Like, these are things that we can do for survival. um so, like, and that allows us to map and build models of human emotional reaction. That's like the beginning of going with the flow, being in Group B. So I would argue that the existence of reincarnation doesn't change the idea that our brains and the way we formulate our ideas, a sense of self and environment, are still in a flow state as infants.
Okay.
Uh,
Fair enough.
It feels like the conflict between those two groups is getting more intense.
It's certainly getting more intense, and it was interesting for me because, and I want to be an optimist, but I lost so much faith in humanity during COVID. If you would have told me how COVID would have gone down before COVID, I'd say no way. We're not that bad. Like, I thought the people aren't that dumb. But when I experienced COVID, it's actually scary. You see how the Nazis managed to do what they did. You see how they managed to put people in concentration camps. You see it.
I had this
And I had a very
just
unique
the other
view of
day. I doubt that most people that were in the Nazi, you think that you would like to recognize evil, but I bet that most people who were being told by Hitler that the Jews were the root of all evil and we can fix everything by getting rid of them, a lot of people just joined that. Oh, everybody, we're groupthink. We're all thinking this way. So today, if you are very confident, without giving it much thought, that you're on the right side of history, with all the things that are coming out, I'm starting to think that the consequences of the camp that you're in now, if some of the conspiracy theories that are being slowly trickling out and more evidence is supporting them, I think you should be very careful to be pointing fingers and saying, let's go punch a Nazi, lest you wake up one day and realize in hindsight that the Nazi was really you. You just weren't educating yourself enough about what was going on and who you're listening to recognize it in the moment. So I think good people were Nazis because they didn't recognize evil when it's right in front of them until we said, oh wow, that was some of the most evil shit ever. And then of course
Or
everybody's like,
even
oh yeah, it's evil.
or even when you recognize it's evil and you're presented with the decision to either be complicit in it or walk away, you decide to be complicit in it, for the sake of, not wanting, like, you just become complicit, and then over time, you start doing these completely heinous things that
Hmm.
before you thought you would never do, but because of the circumstance, you've become molded to most efficiently adapt to that position, and and
Yep.
the only way to get comfortable to greater and greater evil is to to enact greater and greater evil.
Yep.
Yeah, no, Jordan Peterson talks about, was it this book by, was it Solzhenitsyn? I can't pronounce his name. That's this book about these policemen in Poland during World War II, that were essentially given that choice. They were, the Nazi Party was occupying, and they had the choice to either follow the directives coming down or walk away, and many of them stayed.
Well,
And
there's
the
probably
project.
consequences. Probably not walking
Oh yeah.
away. Probably walking
Well,
away
no.
with broken legs, so it's
Well, no,
not.
no, they're so, like, their captain, they're like the police captain there. They were like, guys, listen, I know what I'm asking you to do. You can walk away. So
Oh,
I'm pretty sure they had the opportunity to just walk away. They
okay.
could just no,
Fair
you know what
enough.
I mean?
Yep.
This wasn't like a Nazi officer giving them this decision. It was like someone they trust and knew and like served with.
But it's the same
Uh,
thing as me taking the vaccine, man. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
you don't know what the real consequences are until you become involved, and then maybe you regret it, but it's too late. So,
Or even Or just like, well, the idea that Peterson often drives is like, if you think that you're, this really virtuous good
hmm
person, you'd be surprised just like how evil you'd be, like the kind of evil you'd be capable of if you felt you had no choice. You know what I
or
mean?
or if you were offered a gigantic reward for it.
And that idea, what he's trying to do fundamentally is to bridge the gap of not like, it's like understanding that evil and how someone's capable of that. And if you can understand what kind of circumstance could facilitate be a catalyst for a person to let's say become evil or commit evil acts, uh, it could make it that kind of awareness can like allow for useful dialogue. You know what I mean?
hmm
As opposed to good versus evil, now there's this gray area in which people can converse in.
Well, there's a movie where this woman cheats on her husband, and it's all a series of events. It's Irreversible or something like that. I could be getting that name wrong. But the premise of it is a devoted wife has some sort of accident or windstorm or something and winds up in the house of a stranger, and it goes from there. She cheats on him, and the point is exactly what we're talking about. Everyone is capable of great evil, and if you don't spend time thinking about what could trigger you and how you could accidentally perpetrate horrible acts without intending to, just kind of falling into situations, then you're living your life like sitting at a roulette table. You're at the mercy of luck, not putting you in a bad situation that tempts you into doing horrible things you wouldn't or normally do. So living your life without thoughtfulness is super dangerous. You basically are driving with your eyes closed, as far as I'm concerned, because
Yeah,
one situation you put yourself in without fully understanding your capabilities is your undoing.
right, right. Yeah, it also could be an opportunity for, someone who has done evil to recognize that or to be able to not just recognize, perhaps they recognized before, but to usefully sit with it in a way that presents them with that option. They can either continue the the evil as where it was once perceived as part of their identity or this cyclical thing that happens to them, and now have the opportunity to live congruent to the way they've lived before. So not only does it help you recognize potential evil within you and prevent that, or choose benevolence, but also allows you to recognize past evil deeds, to reflect on it, and to choose good in the future. So that's why it's like this idea that like there's something, some people are beyond redemption. It's like, sure, there are a lot of things that people can do that makes them beyond it, but everybody deserves the opportunity to pursue it. Like,
Yes.
uh, if you have two child rapists sitting on a bench, one is oblivious to the malice and evil they're doing on the world and feeds off of the attention, and one is extremely regretful, and now seeks to do the opposite with their life, regardless of if they have the opportunity to do so. It's like you won't be viewing both of them as the same. I mean, yeah, they've done the same evil, but they're not the same person, clearly. So,
That's a difficult redemption arc. That's probably the most difficult one.
especially in today's world. I mean,
And I think in
even in any world.
any world, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
pretty much.
pure innocence versus pure evil. I'd say hard to get much more extreme opposite than an adult that does that to a child.
This is 100% true.
COVID, because in the first days of COVID, when people were falling over in China and the Italian hospitals were overrun, at the height of the panic, when most people believed, because it was the very beginning, early stages, my brother and I had a very logical conversation and said, we're two military-aged men in very good physical condition.
So this is just about COVID. How are you feeling? We're
if it
about
can kill
3
us,
hours, 10
it's zombie
in.
apocalypse.
Are you
So why are we going to live
good
in
to go
fear?
for?
So we found the only two countries that were
What are you
open,
thinking?
which were Sweden and Belarus.
I've got easily another half hour.
We'd just
in me.
been to Belarus.
Okay.
This is before the Ukraine war. We'd
perfect.
just been there. We decided to try Sweden. So for the first 3 months of COVID, during the height of lockdowns, when Florida was closed, when it was absolute...
I remember.
Yeah, when it was the craziest lockdowns globally. Me and Tristan are in Sweden in absolute
I would say
freedom.
this part
They had no
not that
restrictions,
important
no
to me.
masks,
I don't want to
no
skip it,
vaccine
but if you have
passports,
stuff
no
to say,
social
instead of
distancing,
stopping,
nightclubs are
I would
full,
plow right
lunch
through
restaurants
this
are
section
open,
personally.
perfectly complete
nothing
normal society.
revelatory or
Nobody talks about
we're
this
just
anymore. Nobody
discussing
talks about, wait, Sweden never
COVID.
did
Who
a
cares?
thing. Everything functioned perfectly fine the entire time. And they don't have it. Where's their where's their illness of their winter of severe illness and death?
Yes.
They never had one.
Yeah, I mean-
it's a cold country. Never had one. So we were
Everybody's
living in
got
Sweden,
their own
living
opinions on
completely
this
normal
section,
lives,
and
seeing everyone,
like,
seeing the
we're not
internet,
gonna
and seeing this
change
insanity, and we're like,
No.
well, surely if we just put up a few
anybody's
videos
opinion,
of
so.
us partying in Sweden in nightclubs, this will wake people up. People didn't want.
But I do
people
like that he
ignored their
recounts
own
this
eyes.
because I mean
That's the scariest
nobody
thing
really
about
talks
everything
about the
is that
fact
they
that
can get
Sweden
to a
never
level
shut
where
down. And what's the
with
other
the
place?
media machine where
Sweden.
people will genuinely ignore their own eyes. I don't understand how you can get people so brainwashed that they will see that the sky is blue, and then they'll watch that the sky
This
is green.
applies to a lot of
and then
stuff,
they'll look at
though.
it again and go, the sky's green. It's crazy to me, but COVID proves they can do that.
Epstein killed himself.
And
The
that's why
guy,
the
Hillary,
war is
the
getting so
Clinton
intense,
aide
because the
who
principal
let
people are
Epstein
saying,
into the
how
White
can you
House
still believe
multiple
in the things
times
that
when
you're
Bill
saying?
Clinton was in office.
Here is all the logical empirical
he
evidence
was found
that is a
hung
lie.
on a property
But these
associated with the
people are
Clinton
ideologically
Foundation, I
brainwashed,
believe,
and they don't want to
hung
take
by an
enough.
extension cord by the neck
They
with
don't
a
have the
shotgun
bravery
wound
it
to the
takes
back
to
of the
wake
head.
up and accept
He
that they're being
committed
lied to. So
suicide.
they'd rather just, to the
Really?
end of
Yeah.
time, repeat
Yeah.
what they're told.
And nobody
And
questions
it becomes
it.
more
It's
and more
brilliant.
intense as it
Just
becomes more
amazing.
and more ridiculous. That's so scary. As it becomes more and more ridiculous, the more intense both sides get.
Yes.
Right? So what the future holds, I'm not entirely sure. But I like to believe, even my current charges, I found solace when I was in jail, that the thinking people are looking at this going, something about this doesn't seem right.
Well, I mean, it is a little bracing. I mean, when I discovered, I mean, I was sympathetic to you already, but you know, a man's accused of human trafficking. It's worth finding out what he's accused of. And when I discovered that there was no like actual human trafficking charge,
Yeah.
you know, that's not actually human trafficking. I don't care what you call it.
Yep.
You weren't buying it, even accused of buying and selling anyone. Then the next conclusion you inevitably reach is they don't like the guy. They don't like his views. It's fine. They're going to send him to jail for that.
Yep.
That does seem like an escalation.
Absolutely. But if they don't like your views and you're inspiring millions of people to resist slave programming, you become a threat. Like, they discuss me.
But you can't send a guy to jail because you disagree with him.
You shouldn't. But even before I went to jail, the members of parliament in the UK were talking about me and what a dangerous role model I am for young boys. So they launched this initiative inside of British schools to ban.
I think people are only dangerous rejecting the slave program when it happens in isolated pockets. But if you have millions of eyes on you perpetually, good or bad, that's a problem. That's right. Yeah, it's like the people who have the potential for real change, they identify them, and they systematically try to subvert their intentions.
If you're not controlled and you have millions of eyes on you, then it's a problem. It's not a problem if you're not controlled, and it's not a problem. It's not a problem if you don't have millions of eyes. It's not a problem if you're not controlled. Those two things are okay, but the two, when they come together, that's a big problem. And the systems of control, as I understand them, rely possibly on the trafficking of children and the placing of children on islands, which then have private jets flown out there, and powerful and wealthy adults do things that they should not be doing. They get recorded, and now they are controlled, and everything is good. But if you escape that filter, then it becomes a real problem if you're able to actually talk openly, and they don't want to kill you because that turns you into a martyr, and that still works. Martyrdom still, it's very powerful to martyr someone. So if someone is clearly speaking truth and they get murdered, I mean, you just increase their power, and I mean, everything that's ever been put out by him would be, basically enshrined in truth, because he was clearly murdered by the system. And it's like, okay, now we know what they don't want us to hear, which is be masculine, virtuous, have principles, and say no. So those, pretty clearly, I mean, look at what they're trying to tell you to do. Clearly, that's what they don't want.
Yeah. So best. I mean, it's unfortunate because they can't kill him, because then he'll turn into a martyr, and if they don't kill him, he's going to continue. Hopefully, he'll continue talking and spreading this message, and maybe wake more people up.
And I think that they arrested him figuring, well, he's rich. He's obviously got some stuff. We'll find it. Just arrest him and go through his shit. And at this point, it doesn't appear that he's got much to throw at him, because that would be the easiest way, right? They don't want to kill him. They want something to hang over his head and say, you will comply. But obviously, he's on the internet right now talking about the same shit they've locked him up for.
He's got fuck you money.
Yeah.
And he's got virtues that he lives his life by.
Mm-hmm.
If the reason why he has the following he does is because he's not just spouting this shit. Honestly, if his whole image was a lie, they would have found tons of shit to indict him, and this would have open and shut case.
Mm-hmm.
Open and shut case. But because there's nothing that they could find, that means he lives a life of enough virtue where there's no evidence of sin in the place that he resides.
Yep.
Or sin that can be fucking
proven.
Or used to try somebody.
No useful sin.
Yeah.
Sadly for them.
Yeah, and it's and it's like it's amazing how somebody of authentic virtue, despite being divisive to their because they're divisive to their media machine, is now a target and of said machine. It's crazy.
Well, I also, the people on the other side that support this, unless they really are so dumb that they believe it, then they're not also understanding that if they endorse this weapon to be used against him, and they allow this to happen, this weapon exists now. This weapon has been created. Now we have it, like he talks about, oh, your system's broken. You got 3 shots. You can slander. You try to accuse you of a crime to ruin your life, and so you bow down and obey, and then murder is the last destination. If they don't need to prove anything anymore, if they can just accuse you and convict you without evidence, you need to understand that you've now created a new system with which to manipulate and control people that can be turned against you. So if you're like, yeah, arrest him. Well, a year from now, you say something that they don't like because everything's changed because nobody sticks by
Bro,
anything. And now
what's
you're in the
crazy?
crosshairs.
Bro, you know what's crazy? They can now alter
Mm.
the the laws and the way that we interact, like that they have to, because we're divided, because like uh non like just treatment being enacted on the opposing side is seen as virtuous from the other, no matter what they do, as long as they don't do the same, they don't change the same thing on both sides. Uh, it will look like it will constantly be held by the masses as virtuous. That's absolutely insane. Yeah,
Well,
that's crazy.
let's just say that UFOs are being used to traffic children. That's completely expected based on what I know about human nature. So let's say that AI does become capable. Let's say deepfake technology gets even better. What do you think deepfakes and AR are going to be used to create? They're going to be used to create video evidence of you. If they don't like you, it's going to be used to create video evidence of you de facto committing a crime that you never actually committed. We're not going to be able to believe our own eyes anymore, sadly, which is what he's just talking about. But we truly are not going to be able to believe our own eyes in a very short period of time, because I've seen videos where they've done this for fun and turned some guy into Tom Cruise, and it's almost indistinguishable, and that's in its infancy. So let's get some polish on that. Let's get 5 more years down the road. You're going to have political people that come out and they're trying to run for office, and we got to shut this down. Let's just make a video and throw it out there of them committing horrible acts. We no longer even need to lure them into a situation where we need to create real videographic evidence. We can just fake it. So at that point, you're going to neuter all the systems of evidence pretty much that we have. If you can fake biological, because a lot of biological, blood is difficult, but biometrics, like once you have it, you can't change it. So fingerprints, same thing. If you lose control of this and it gets stolen on the internet, you can't change your fingerprints. Now they're compromised. It's not a password that you can change. So if they're able to hijack your likeness, like they're showing Tupac on a stage, there's all kinds of crazy shit that's going on. You're not going to be able, in a very short period of time, you're not going to be able to believe anything, even when it's shown to you on a video. You know,
Well,
I
it's
don't know how.
the funny is I already like I'll see this is a video of this guy in Russia. He's like an expert knife thrower, and he throws this metal pipe into a rack of logs. It sticks into the logs, and then he throws a metal rod, and it goes into the metal cylinder where he threw it. So it's a beautiful display of his mastery of his skill
Mm-hmm.
and all the hard work, and it was the comment section was a majority saying, "Oh, it's reversed, it's fake. Look how he slowed it down. Look how the video is edited." There's already that that necessity to scrutinize what we actually see with our eyes is already there in our younger generations,
Yep.
because they're aware of this. They're acutely tuned in to technology and its evolving nature because of how interconnected their social life is with technology. Um, and I posted, I was like, guys, this is not like humans are capable of amazing things. If you think this person needed to reverse it for internet clout, I mean, you live in such a isolated world where you haven't really experienced what we're capable, the greatness we're capable of,
Yes.
essentially. All right, good.
And me. My name can't be said inside of any British school. And members of parliament were standing up in parliament saying Andrew Tate is dangerous. He's encouraging young boys to have misogynistic views, because I'm literally telling young men to go to the gym and to stand up for themselves and believe in themselves and believe in something. And by extension, you look at some of the sexual education books these children are being given.
Here we go.
Which I believe at an age 9, I don't think a child needs to learn about anal sex or any of these things.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. So they're pushing that
Imagine
to the children.
a
but
grown
I'm
man
banned.
saying that 10 or 20 years
Well, they're
ago.
also pushing weed and video
and having
games
any
on boys.
pushback on
Completely.
that.
And you can listen to rap music about killing people all day long. And there's a whole, and Lil Nas, he can have sex with the devil in his music videos. That's fine. but I'm dangerous for saying go to the gym. And once I realized what was scary to me is, I said this to my brother. I said, once the parliament's discussing,
if you can't laugh at it,
you're
it's
basically
just depressing,
considered
you know?
a national security threat at this point. You're a threat to national security at that level.
I feel like I've
And then all
already
bets are
laughed
off,
at it. Now
right?
it's
If-
just
What about
oh,
the
yeah,
UK?
no, that's-
So the UK has become more authoritarian than anywhere in the Persian Gulf.
Correct.
How did that happen?
This is crazy too. I don't know if you've done
and
any
it's, like I said, it's
research
very
about the
interesting
fact
because
that
people
France
still,
is on fire
the
with
people in
protests,
Camp B who
and the
don't
UK
think,
is
a lot of them
pretty
believe
dickish
that
toward their
the
people.
law
Yeah,
is fair.
I'm like vaguely.
I've
aware.
had people say to me, "Oh yeah, what they're doing to you is garbage. Well, you need a lawyer." So yeah, I do need a lawyer, and I do have a lawyer. Thank you, but it's not that simple, unfortunately. You know, the law is very subjective, and if they want to attack you with it, they're going to do a very good job of attacking you with it. And that's what the UK does. The UK have these laws which are extremely subjective, and they can use it as a weapon to basically silence anyone they decide
But
or
why?
hurt anyone they decide.
England is the birthplace of free speech, of
Completely.
habeas corpus, of kind of framework of liberal democracy that we thought we believed in.
Yep.
And now it's a country where people are arrested for praying.
Well,
What happened?
good question. And there's a saying that I heard, and I don't know who said it, but he said that a sick country adopts laws like a dying man will try medicine. And I think that the UK is failing in real time. If you look at it in any metric, whether it's living standards, whether it's crime rate, any metric you can measure the success of a country by, it's fallen off the cliff. It's becoming more and more expensive to live there. The education system's gone down the pan. London is the stabbing capital of the world. You're not safe to leave your house. So their answer to this is just more and more and more laws. And unfortunately, as they do that, they're not even intelligent enough to actually attack the people who are doing genuinely bad to the world. They just make more and more authoritarian laws, and they end up using them to attack the people that the government doesn't like. And I ended up being one of them. And I think Europe in general has problems. If you look at France as we speak, I think it's on fire, isn't it? Most of it?
It is.
Yeah. So they have issues, and their answer, what's a government's solution to anything? Law. What can a government do? No matter what.
But they're not laws that are aimed at fixing the problem that's right in front of them.
No, they're laws aimed at fixing the person who's talking about the problems.
So
Why don't you get rid of the guy who tells everybody? Isn't that easier, Tucker? Why fix any of this? If we just shut him up, they won't know.
No, but that's like responding to a heat wave by breaking your thermometer.
Completely right.
It's
That's the plan.
insane.
Plan one is to break the thermometer. We might deal with the heat wave a bit later, but
Get air conditioning. No, let's break the thermometer.
for now, there's too many people talking about the heat wave. So let's just break that. And then later on, maybe when we have time, we'll do something about the actual issue.
It does seem like a lot of this is an effort not to talk about the real thing in Europe anyway, which is migration.
Yeah.
And the UK, formerly known as England, and France have both been completely changed by people from other countries.
Yep.
And I'm sure have added good things too. I mean, I'm not,
course.
but they've changed them, and in general, they're not better countries. And like, why can't anyone admit that?
But this is what's really interesting to me about what's happening, because we're talking about masculinity and men who say no and men who stand up. But there has to be balance, right? Yeah. Everywhere in the world, there has to be power balances. If there's not a balance in power, there's going to be a vacuum, and that's going to be filled. If you neuter the native population of men, if you destroy their mentality to resist, if you tell them that every single thing about them masculine is wrong, and you basically feminize and eunuchate them, turn them into eunuchs, and then you import high testosterone men from the third world who don't believe any of this garbage, who grew up in a society where they understand the only way to succeed is to be a fearsome predator to a degree. What do you think is going to happen? Like, who's supposed to protect the sanctity of these nations and these settlements and these towns and villages? The police? No. In general, I would argue that it's the masculine essence that can be detected by the people who arrive. I guarantee if you were to put a bunch of these migrants in Sarajevo or Moscow, they'd behave themselves.
But yeah.
I have a feeling they'd just look around and go, not today. But when you neuter the native populace, then it's like, well, there's a power vacuum. And when there's a power vacuum, what do we expect to happen? So that's what's so...
What are the French going to do about it? What's your average Englishman going to do about it?
Nothing. And that's the thing. And that makes you wonder, is this purposeful? Like, why these two actions of neutering the native populace and importing these high testosterone third worlders are so at odds with each other. Is this purposeful? I'm not sure, but has anyone considered this? So yeah, it's interesting because you talk about
these are huge and intentional trends, and I mean they're historically transformative trends. They're a big deal, and so they're probably not happening by accident, right? There's got to be some intent. How could there not be?
That's right. And how do they expect all of this to end? And this is exactly what's happening with migration. The problem with migration specifically is that there's no native masculine populace to enforce any degree of culture or boundary or parameter. And like I said,
So a lot of people are confused with the peanut butter allergy explosion. I actually read a study that breaks it down. They took, I think it was 4 groups. The control group was no peanut butter for either the mother or the infant. And then the other groups were either infant or mother was exposed to minor amounts of peanut butter, and the 4th group was both mother and baby were exposed to peanut butter throughout and after pregnancy. The highest incident of peanut allergy was in the group that had no exposure, mother or infant, and the group with the least amount of issues was the one where both the mother and the child had small amounts of peanut butter during the process. I know for a fact that there's been studies showing that there's been a very substantial decline in the testosterone in men in America. I'm less sure about the Europe, France, the Europe region. I don't know if it's identical, but I do wonder, and I'm not sure if it's some change with the food, something to do with what's Monsanto is doing. They pretty much run the food system, unless it's on the meat side. You got Tyson on that side, but it's got to be either something in our environment or something in our diet that is causing this, unless it's just actually a consequence of neutering our ability to be men. I don't know, maybe all it takes is just for us not to fill that role and be protectors and fighters and be aggressive, and it just naturally falls. I'm not sure if it's physiological or mental, environmental, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I can tell you right now, it is our diet. And the problem in everybody's diet are pills.
And soy boys.
Well, no, so the idea is like, okay, so there's a outward behavior that we don't like, and we're gonna label it, and it's reoccurring, and we're gonna label it as a mental disability, and we're gonna treat that with pills. Let's say that mental disability is a consequence of a reoccurring emotional reaction and overcoming, and that is associated with like displays of aggression, displays of, you know what I mean, like you know, you have to have the opportunity to overcome these negative emotions in order to be the stronger person on the other side. If you neuter our ability to confront our emotions or our habitual pathways, you deprive us of the opportunity of overcoming them and thus becoming stronger. As opposed to we're outsourcing that ability to pharmaceuticals. Let that medicine be thy food. It's like eating right, and I don't know. It's like we also ideologically shun things associated with aggression and violence, and therefore, and because the production of testosterone kind of increases the probability of displaying those behaviors, it's seen as something to limit. But violence is necessary in some real sense, and learning to control your propensity and understand your tendency for violence does make you stronger, and it makes you more capable of violence, as opposed to being overwhelmed by your reaction to it. You understand it, and you can harness its ability for good to protect that which you love.
So I have these weird dreams where I wake up and my butthole's sore, and I just remember like these guys in gray suits with big heads and big eyes. They were like using this contraption. They were like extracting something out of my anus, and I suspect that that's my testosterone, and they're farming it. So I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not, So
what the fuck?
Just watch out for that.
Dude, watch out for that, dude. Jesus Christ, you're gonna have nightmares now.
Don't sleep. I wouldn't recommend sleeping. You're gonna wake up less of a man.
I would argue
that's where they get you. It's only when I close my eyes to the men in gray suits appear, dude. Oh
point.
shit.
And I've been to Sarajevo and I've been to Moscow. I've been to these places and I've seen there's a whole bunch of migration and everybody seems to just behave a little bit differently. And I think that's because people understand
That men live here?
that men live here. If you turn up in someone's house and their house is pristine, you're probably going to take your cup and you're going to go put it in the kitchen. But if you turn up in somebody's house and it's a fucking mess and nobody respects the house and nobody cares and the man is drugged out of his mind, half asleep on the couch, what are you going to do with your cup? You're going to leave it there. You don't give a shit. If you turn up to the Western world and look at it.
Then you're going to hit on his wife.
Absolutely. So what do we expect to happen in these scenarios, right? And it is purposeful and it is scary that even me just telling men to go to the gym is seen as an act of defiance to the point where I have to be punished. I must go to jail. I must be silenced. Thermometer must be broken.
If at the end of all of this, no matter what happens, do you plan to stay in Romania?
I love that he breaks
Romania.
it down and gives
love this
that
country.
analogy, so it's much
And
easier to
if I am
understand.
found not
You know,
guilty,
he
I
does
will stay in Romania, yeah.
that's a
I
really
will still
good
stay here.
tool
I don't
to
believe in running
explain what
away.
he's talking about.
I also believe, and perhaps this is...
Yeah, I didn't even want to ask you that because
No,
you've
but
got a
look,
legal
it-
case pending, but I mean, presumably you're rich enough to run away when you have.
Our, society. Like, if the society is chaotic, if it's poorly structured, and the people are unhappy, you're not going to be a model citizen. You'll probably, do as others do. You know what I mean? If you identify your home as your country, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm conflicted with this because, like, I understand there's two sides to everything. Nothing is pure good or pure evil. A hammer can be used to murder or build a house. So the idea of the globalist agenda, on one hand, I understand the concept that the infighting that occurs because of nationalism and all the countries mean that we are divided. But the fear of consolidating to one world government means only one thing needs to be corrupted in the world. One small group of people. When you consolidate into the hands of too few, it just becomes too easy to corrupt it and take advantage. And so on one hand, I'm like, man, a global civilization would be incredible. No more barriers and division and all this stuff. And then I say also super dangerous because it could be utopia. It could be absolute hell. The whole world could turn into a third world country with just corruption and everything is just bought and paid for. I mean, not that America's just more expensive. Everything's still bought and paid for, but you know what I mean. Like, it could be altruistic or it could be pure evil, and you're dependent on that.
What I would say is, if a world government was to exist, and let's say in the near future, it would go from apparent utopia to very apparent hell very quickly. And I think by necessity, I think it must do that. If it happens. Um, it's like every civilization, both in isolation and the ones that have come together, it's like we're perpetually trying to approach the most optimal way to organize ourselves, and our actions. You know what I mean? Like to generate work or to have a meaningful work. We're constantly trying to update those societal models, and uh, all of the crime, you know what I mean? All of the discontent is a consequence of failing societal models. Because by necessity, they'll need to be updated and updated, updated perpetually until we have a new Babylon, where
Yep.
all of them come together under one spot and unite in virtue and ideal.
I would say that America was at one point the closest thing to Babylon that we might ever see in our lifetime, and it's somehow been corrupted and shoved the other way. I would say we're more divided, and then like around the 2000s when Dave Chappelle was making jokes on Comedy Central that were very offensive if you chose to view them that way, but were also hilarious because it was truth. Um, During that period, I'd say that was the closest we're going to get to something like Babylon, unless we make a huge U-turn right now. The way we're headed is just awful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think a one world government probably happened, but just like Babylon, it will go from utopia to hell
Yep.
very quickly.
Every story you read is that's what. Yep, that most likely
But
outcome.
I think once we get to a world government, uh, after that recycles, after the one world government recycles, I think we'll be as close to the most efficient way to orient ourselves to maximize the experience we're having now that will possibly ever be.
Yep.
Like I think that's what a lot of prophecies talk about. Because I got this buddy who's like really into prophecy, and he's like, "It's going to be one world government. It's going to be ruled by was it the beast,
The
the false
Antichrist.
prophet, and the Antichrist, or the Antichrist, the false prophet, and one other thing, the beast. Um, and they're gonna control the world, and there's going to be Judgment Day, and so it aligns with at least that prophecy that something like that will occur, uh, and it's been prophesized to occur, which
Hmm.
is interesting.
Have it.
Correct. I'm not going anywhere. I think if I was anywhere in the Western world, this would have happened to me. I don't think this is Romania's fault. Let's put it that way. I don't think this is Romania's fault. I think if I resided in Switzerland or France or Italy, the same thing would have happened. From knowing what I know, I think it was going to happen to me regardless. And I think I do have a large amount of sympathy, especially amongst the Romanian population. I get thousands of messages a day from Romanians apologizing to me. I think the people here actually like me.
My waiter at lunch yesterday is one of them. He wants you to know, yeah.
Oh, amazing. This is what I mean. Everyone understands what's happening. My problem is not with Romania. I don't hold any personal grudges against Romania. I think that this Matrix attack was going to come to me. Basically.
What is the Matrix?
Good question.
Neo.
I guess some Americans call it the deep state, but I like to look at it in a more global way. When I say the Matrix, I think there are certain agendas which are being pushed. I think the media machine and the judicial systems of the world work together hand in hand. I think the goal is to control people's minds to a point where they don't discuss anything that's important. The reason I use The Matrix is because I've watched that movie a few times and it has so many similarities to the... Have you seen the movie?
No.
You've never seen the movie The Matrix?
No, I don't watch
Tucker.
any movie. I don't
Tucker.
want to talk about it on camera. No, I'm very
appreciate-
dyslexic and it's hard for me to watch video.
Got it.
Honestly.
Understood.
I appreciate Tate's exasperation after watching The Matrix, dude. Like, what the fuck?
Who hasn't seen that? It's one of the best movies, at least if you're referencing the current times, one of the best movies. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, for at least in Tucker's defense, when you're married to your job the way he has, you don't have time for much else except for your family
Mhm.
and your job. You know what I mean?
And that's just prioritization. You know, if you've got so much going on that you don't have time for movies, that's okay. I mean, most people don't. But honestly,
he's gonna make time for it now, dude.
if I had enough money where I didn't need to do the less expensive things in life, I mean, when I was a kid, part of the reason that I drank so much was because I didn't have the money to still go skiing. I didn't have the money to still go do the things that I was doing when I was a child living with my father. There's a period in time where I just did not have the disposable income, so I would take what I called chemical vacations because I couldn't afford to go to the Bahamas. But if I could choose between a bottle of booze and a plane trip to somewhere exotic, or going and spending the day out and having a beautiful meal and not caring about what it costs, you know, why would I play video games? Why would I do any of these things that are poor man's replacement for the real thing? I only use those things because I'm poor. If I'm rich, then I'm living life. I'm not worried about what it costs to go the places I want to go, to do the things I want to do. None of that matters. It's just however I want to spend my time and however I feel I would most enjoy the time I have. So I get it.
Yeah,
I probably wouldn't watch movies either if I was Tucker Carlson. Why?
That's true.
I don't need to escape. If I want to escape, I just get on a plane. I really escape. I go on my yacht. I don't know.
Well, Well, do you think we or at least me and you make time to not only react to this, but to like spread awareness about certain ideas by virtue of us, let's say, not having the economic freedom to be enjoying life as opposed to be reporting on its travesties or its inefficiencies?
So the people close to me who understand that I am truly trying to be helpful, even though I'm talking about sometimes things that most people think are are crazy that this is how I spend my time paying attention to stuff like this. They're like, of course you're having trouble and you're depressed. You're tuned into all kinds of BS that's going on. Just ignore it. Just forget it. Just enjoy yourself. Turn it off. Just go. So a lot of people, when I try to engage with them and talk about things that we're talking about right now, their eyes after about 5 to 10 minutes become glassy. They don't really have a lot to send back my way, so it becomes a one-directional conversation, and there becomes a point where I get sick of talking at people, and I don't feel like it's welcome, and so I kindly F off.
Right.
But anyone who's willing to engage, and I see that immediately, I lean right in. I want anyone who wants to talk about real stuff, I want to engage immediately. But most
Right.
people don't. Most people back away. Most people are like, okay, nut jobs, see you later, wacko. I'll be over there with the normal people. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. No hard feelings. But at the same time, I'm not going to force you to listen to my thoughts and my beliefs. If you just want to talk about the Patriots, we don't have a lot in common there, because I couldn't give two
Right.
shits about any sort of organized sports or any sort of teams, whether that's Republicans and Democrats or you name it. This corporation, oh, I like Gucci, I like this. I don't wear brand. I mean, I got this, but it's just because I like the dry fit shirts and I like this cut. I don't like Nike. I just like the specific cut of this shirt where the seam is not on my shoulder. So what? It's got this thing. That means nothing to me. Material possessions mean nothing to me, and the more I divorce myself from wanting and lusting after things that cost money, the less I'm a slave to the work system. If I look at every dollar I spend as a dollar I have to go back and get another one, then I become much more careful about how I allocate my financial resources. And if I stop
Yeah.
lusting after the things that they want, then I no longer am a consumer of new vehicles every couple years. And it vastly reduces the amount of money that I need to bring into my life and the compromises that I need to make with my time to do so. My goal is not to become rich. My goal is simply to reach the breaking point where I have enough that I have free time, that I can
Yeah.
spend my time. That's all I want. If I can get to that point, I'm done. I am done.
Yeah.
Just enough. I don't need a yacht. I don't need any of this stuff. I just need enough to sustain the things that I want to do, and the things that I want to do are very simple.
Yeah, and
Overland. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just making the trying to make the connection that like, because like you, I share, similar values, and I'm sure there's many people who, share the same, but I think it's a consequence of being like, I wonder if it's, because we're in this position of, let's say, um, uh, poorly defined, slavery, servitude to this system. You know what I mean? That we're perpetually trying to amass enough income to just be okay. The reason why we have these virtues and these values, or we seek meaning beyond the monotony of the slave-like life that we have here, is by consequence of us having to live in it.
Hmm.
And perhaps that's something missing from the people who the cabal he may be talking about, the deep state, the matrix, the people who want to keep us subservient, and
Hmm.
that they can't experience the desire for that kind of virtue because they haven't experienced the servitude that is being essentially structured.
Well, there's an interesting thing that's happening. As they increase the price to live and have a family and own a home and buy food, they are, by increasing the prices of what otherwise were very cheap services that kept you in the system. As they price you out of it, they now are making it more attractive to someone who is financially minded and wants to escape. You start to realize, wow, when food was cheap, what didn't make as much sense to go homestead and get off the grid and become sustainable, grow your own food when cucumbers are $1 cucumber. But when they become $5 and all the other and the meat and everything goes up accordingly, and it's all polluted with toxins and pesticides and shit, there becomes a financial breakpoint where, wow, now you're starting to really incentivize me to go find a piece of property that I can farm on and produce my own beef and vegetables. Now it becomes profitable. childcare, and if you have a dog that you send to dog care now, which is a thing, if you combine the concept of that price with the price to live and everything else, the more prices go up, the more you incentivize people to go separate from that system. And so, as much as they think that people are just going to continue to put up with this shit, rational thinkers who think outside the box and are problem solvers, they are going to start to recognize that this system is not as beneficial now that it's starting to take more and more of their limited resources. And they're not being provided any more wage. They're just being asked to pay higher prices for the same things that 2-3 years ago used to cost one half or one third of their current prices. And these are just basic human staples. The ability to transport yourself to your workplace and to the places you want to go in your vehicle, and feeding yourself and having a roof over your head. Rent is astronomical. All this stuff, when you bring it all together, you're incentivizing people to jump out of the matrix that he's talking about. If that's what you want, keep going, because you're just making it more appealing to separate yourself from the bullshit.
Well, honestly, like, part of me, I don't know. Part of me thinks like, well, they don't necessarily want us. Like, I think like having us be like subservient worker drones is just convenient for what they really want. It's like I don't think they're really thinking about the longevity of the current structure that allows them to have authority and power and influence over the structure. Perhaps they're, I don't know.
They want to take as much as they can from you until they think that you're close to rebellion. And they'll continue until they think that they can get there. And the more that they reduce the resistance, as he's talking about, the farther they can push things. The harder they can put their boot on your neck. And no one will say shit.
Yeah, it's like
I believe COVID was a I'm not going to say it was pre-rehearsed, but I will say that I think that they wrote down the lessons that they learned during that period and will use those and apply those to a future situation. I don't know what that situation will be, and I'm not going to go so far as to say it was just orchestrated for the purpose of a dry run. But since it happened, they said, well, let's see what we can do here. Let's see how people react. Let's push it. And my opinion, same thing he said, people really caved way more than I thought they would.
yeah, yeah. I think it was just like trying to test how much of the population they can successfully manipulate on,
Mhm.
just because based on their position of authority.
Yeah.
Potentially. I don't know.
It wasn't all like that, but there was an element of actors inside the ecosystem that were definitely that was their mindset. I don't have names or anything, but if there's
Right.
good, there's evil. There's both in the system, and there's both agendas in there. So,
This is true.
you ready?
Let me see. So I probably should be getting to bed
Okay.
here soon.
Then
Yes, sir.
let's just kill it right now. We're at 48:56. I'm gonna post this as part one, and we will.
Well, so before you post it, are we still live?
Yeah. You want me to kill it?
Yeah.